pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nick, would you please have our prayer?
Father, we thank you tonight for your loving kindness and tender mercies. Lord, just guide and direct as we do things this evening, Father, to accommodate county government, that whatever we say and do will bring glory and honor to you. We lift up your name. You've been gracious and kind to us. Forgive us that where we fall short, for we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Nick.
I would ask that everyone sign in. All right, council, look over your minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes dated June 13th, 2022.
Motion's been made to accept the minutes. Is there a second?
I say.
Seconded by Nick. All those in favor? Motion carried.
One abstention.
Two abstentions. Okay, next. Our financial review.
Good evening, council, everybody, tonight, first and good night. Council, we kind of, you've got a lot of different things on your agenda tonight, so kind of overall, we are at the halfway point on June 30th, the calendar year and the fiscal year match in Owen County, so kind of look at that. I'd like to start, if I could, just real quick, just with an opinion though, just on the environmental factors. As far as all the decisions you have to make tonight, looking at all of these numbers, opinion-wise, I think that it's fairly clear that this is a very volatile economic time. It's really unprecedented inflation going back from 40 years, the supply chain, the interest rates, a very volatile job market. So just kind of, would just always, and I know you do, kind of keep those in mind. There are some line items that it's obvious that there are going to need more appropriations by the end of the year. We've talked about this before, and there was a remedy made for the gas and oil. Utilities will probably be next, and very likely there's going to be a time when the sheriff's budget as far as the meals. There's a few others that, you know, at least need to be watched. So I do not think it's going to be possible, like from between June 30th to December 31st, not to look at some additional appropriations off of the budget. But aside from that, it's very, very consistent. Very consistent, everything's in line. There's very few items, when you look at the percent, you would want at this time everything either be 50% of the appropriation or more available, and you have that in fund after fund. So the first 6 months looks very good and very, very consistent following appropriations. With that, as far as our actual numbers, on June 30th, the general fund balance had an ending total of $1,550,470.38. That is the 7th consecutive month the general fund has been in a positive balance. Again, using all the cliches, chickens and hatching, but staying consistent staying on the plan of the budget, I think there's a very reasonable probability of going the next 6 months and staying in the positive. That's what you want. Industry standards, 1.5 million. Generally, about every economic area, finance is going to say you want about 1.3 to 1.4 million in reserve. Again, going back to the first point, as far as the totality of this economic situation, it would be my recommendation that you would want to consider and keeping that reserve number, in that range. As far as on the 7th of late last week, it went down to 1.3, but the lit distribution had not come in yet. It probably has by now, that stayed consistent at 1.5. As far as your general fund revenues, there was a question that was asked as far as settlement and non-settlement. So in the first 6 months, there is a lit certified distribution. That is a fixed amount of revenue. That's $211,124.58. That comes in every month, and it will come in the remaining 6 months. I do believe it may change by a penny or two on that December 31st one. That's your consistent. About everything else is variable as far as what comes in, but so the average for the first 6 months was $283,749.08. So if you took all 6 months, combined them, that's your average consistent. Looking ahead, using this as a base, a projection of $283,749 would be reasonable, plus or minus, for the next 6. Now, Councilman Neff had asked a really good question about what happens if we include the property tax settlement. Remember, those are 2 distributions, primarily one in May, one in December, that comes in, including the property tax settlement with the property tax, CVET, a couple of other smaller funds. But that average is $420,416.98. $420,416.98. Now, the next time that Owen County will see a property tax settlement probably would be, I would say, either very late November, very early December, if we keep with the pattern of Owen County. But those are the 2 numbers that would come in. Your revenue streams of your major funds, it's about half and half. About half are fixed amounts, so you can predict to the penny pretty much what these funds are going to have. What I mean by that is general has $211,124.58. You know that's coming in. For lit edit, it's $84,896. That's your fund 1112. That comes in at a larger amount, but it has to be distributed to Spencer and to Gosport. But you can take 6 times 84,896. That's your total revenue. It will not be any more than that. EMS is from 1151. That's a variable. That's based on billing. But as far as kind of looking at some predictions there, that's averaged about $85,000 in revenue each month, the first 6 months. Local road and street is 1169. That is also a variable fund. Roughly 91,000 is what comes in from those 2 revenue sources. The sheriff's at 1170. That is fixed. So it's 254,543.17 times 6. That's how much revenue you're going to have come in for the remainder of the year. So as you go through here, you see anyone that's fixed, you just multiply by 6. It will not be any more. Those are the rates that are coming in. Good news, though, I would point out on the 1233. 1233 has a fixed rate of $71,882.83. That is the tax that is on the clock that is timed and will expire for 22 years. That topped $1 million with this revenue. So there's right at $1 million in the 1233 fund. These are, with one comment, is on the highway. As you can see, at 1173, it's about 134,000. 1176 is 135, and local road and street is 91. Pure opinion, complete opinion, but these numbers may have peaked in May. Looking at June, all of them went down. July has not come in yet, and August, historically, year after year after year, is going to be lower. So just a caution, I don't think I would recommend just taking a straight ×6 there. In all likelihood, it's very possible we may have peaked for the year. Spoke with that with the highway superintendent, and I think he concurs with that. So I would say look at that as your maximum. Now, with doing that, you can tell exactly how much money the highway is expected to come in. I would lower that a little bit based on projections. The other thing is your fund versus financial. The beginning balance on January 1st of 2022, the Owen County, all of its funds together, that 7-page fund, collected roughly about 10.4 million, 10.4, 10.5. It was the same at the end of January, end of February, end of March, end of April. Very consistent, very, very consistent, no wide fluctuations. Also a good indicator that your internal controls, your appropriated budget, auditors vetting, and department heads vetting, all working. That's where you get that consistent number. On May 31st, the ending balance was $13 million. That's with settlement. And we ended June, $13 million. So again, real good consistency at the start and real good consistency here. Looking good on those. All of your major operating funds all have a positive balance. Through it, you do have some funds in the red, I'm not talking about the historical, but you do have some grants. Almost every one of those grants is reimbursable. That would not be a significant concern. Auditor's office is well aware of these, and so are the departments. So those come in, the claims are paid, then it's a reimbursement afterwards. So from that. Now, as far as the ARP, the second distribution, at least as of today, it has not come in yet. So the reason I point out on that, there is a plan for the ARP looking at the lost revenue. The hope was by December 31st, after all this is done, to end those two historical red funds, the payroll, business payroll benefits, and then the 9051 highway. It's going to be really contingent upon when the actual money comes in, because it's going to come. The money has to be spent, but I would say probably an early warning. It may be difficult to have these resolved by zero by December 31st. The hope was that distribution was going to come in on May 30th, in May. Well, May's come, June has come, and now we're kind of getting into mid-July. Once that comes, we'll come up to you. But I would kind of put it back to mind, we may have to re-look at goals maybe February, March, as far as having those funds zeroed out.
A question on that, Jim, if I may. So if that fund has a cash balance because we've not yet gotten to spend what's left in there. So we have some obligations, like we had some bridge projects, we've got road projects. And so not all of that 2 million has been used yet. Is there a way to just leverage the balance at the moment to go ahead and start taking care of payroll and offsets, knowing that other 2 million is gonna then come in soon? You could at least get started on it and not delay that particular part of the project.
My answer is theoretically, yes, that probably could be done. Respectfully, I wouldn't, because all of that money has basically been put in a plan that's already there. It would have to be revised, and I know the highway, at least one bridge is done. I believe 2 other bridges and the road have already been bid out and contracts awarded. So most that is left is on the chip and seal, which I believe the highway was getting ready to start. So what I would say, if we realistically did that, one concern would be, even though there's probably only 1% chance, the money's not here. So there would be the hesitancy of not spending money that's not actually come in, and it would require the commissioners and the highway, they would have to revise their chip and seal, because really, almost all that money has actually been spoken for. I understand the theory, but it may be very difficult to.
Yeah, and that was just a thought. Nothing, I'm not suggesting the highway delay or do anything like that, but if there was an opportunity and there was some planning with that, depending on the timing, it might be something that could be workable.
It might be, maybe something, if the money for some reason isn't here by August and they haven't, it could be looked at. It wouldn't be something I would probably recommend right now, because one, it could come in any day, and two, we would have to go through commissioners and have to revise the plan.
Okay.
Okay, highway funds, mid-year report. For the highway funds, just some different things we looked, they have some very consistent, but I want to put just a little bit more in detail what I meant by the revenue going down. So in 1169, in May, the revenue that came in 69 was 39,209. In June, it dropped to 36. Again, only 3,000, but when you take 3,000, start multiplying by 6 and knowing August. The other one that was a little more concerning to me was the May in 1173. It was 142,000. In June, it dropped all the way down to 129,000. So just kind of back in the mind, as you're looking, with the highway or what you want to do on it, all of those have positive balances. That is pretty much in a nutshell where we're at. All of your operating funds are in a positive balance. The plan, I would say, from your budget is working. The vast majority are at the 50% or over. You've got some appropriations, have to be careful for, look ahead. We'll discuss, I'm gonna keep those in mind. Then I know that budgetary time is coming in. But that's kind of a nutshell of where we are on the accounts and your revenue streams.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim.
Okay, we are moving on to old business. We had a wage committee meeting. And we'll just review a little bit about what was discussed. We discussed, of course, what it would take, the bottom line on to bring everybody up to the low point, which was, now it's down to, it's what, 275,000 something
Yeah, let me pull that here.
here. Which, of course, we need to take into consideration, we have 100,000 extra, which is not that much. So go ahead, Anton, if you want to expound on that just a little.
There are previous estimates for bringing everybody to the low point and really have not changed because those positions are still at where they're at now. And the targets are the targets. So back, I think it was in May, when we last had those cost projections, those are the same, okay? And that accounts of that 275 figure. Let me do the math real quick. It was about a system-wide cost of about 125,000, okay? So, and when I say system-wide, we have the general fund, we have the highway fund, the sheriff, we have multiple funds. So that's not all general, but that would be the aggregate annual cost if you were to take positions that are not already at that low point to the low point. And I do want to caution, just so people understand, not all positions are in that category. There's some already above the low point, and not everybody would apply. But those who are grossly underpaid, this would go ahead and bring it so that no one in the system is below the low point. And it's just, my personal opinion, no one should be below that point at all. And that's something that would help us take a step forward to calibrate into the new system and eliminate one cost variable to this, complex setup. The other part of it, the other part of that 275 that Polly mentioned was the cost of bringing everybody up to a standard rate of longevity pay. Right now we have 3 different levels or amounts of longevity. We have 8.5 cents per hour per year for most support-related employees and a combination of some specialty, highway, jailers, 911 dispatchers that are at that level. We also have a small group of individuals that are at 11 cents an hour per year per year of service. And those match up with our appointed positions. So when you think about EMS director, highway superintendent, building and planning department administrator, veteran service officer, EMA, those kind of positions, they're at 11 cents an hour. And then you have a lot of our public safety positions, which would include sheriff's deputies, paramedics, EMTs, that are getting 20 cents an hour right now. Except part-time EMTs and paramedics are not. So what this particular part of that proposal would do is bring everybody to 20 cents so that there isn't any, I don't want to say unfairness, but there's a uniform amount that's applied regardless of where anybody in the system ends up. It would solve a couple of problems. One is part-time, has been a little disadvantaged with that. And I know when you think about EMTs and paramedics, for instance, that are part-time, they're only getting 8.5 cents an hour, whereas their counterparts who are equally trained are getting 20. You also have situations where some people have moved within our county system, and because of the direction they moved, it created this weird situation, and 911's one of them, where the new employee wound up getting paid more than an existing employee because their longevity was higher. And yeah, that can't be helped, but the way our policy is they're entitled to that, and it kind of created it an unfair way of figuring it. So if we are to eventually put our new system into place where we base everything on job responsibilities instead of archaic categories, then the longevity should be uniform, because that would be its own separate thing that's independent of what the position is and the duties and responsibilities that that position does. So that's kind of the thought. And then the third part, which is fairly small dollar impact, is the education component. There was a proposal to basically expand who qualifies for that system-wide to any position that doesn't already require you to have a certain degree. So for instance, if you have a deputy prosecutor, they have to have a legal degree. That's just a requirement. The policy would not give them another dollar amount for having a legal degree. That's double dipping. But any position that doesn't otherwise require a degree, whether it's associates, bachelor's, or whatever it is, then they would qualify for so much per hour for whatever that degree is. And it doesn't matter whether they work in the highway department, or whether they're in the auditor's office, or they're in dispatch, or a sheriff's deputy. They would get access to that education component. The other part to that would be increasing the amount. We only give 11 cents per hour for an associate's degree. We give 22 cents an hour for a bachelor's, and we give 33 cents for a higher or professional degree. The discussion in our committee was creating those at 50-cent increments. So you had 50 for associates, $1 for bachelor's, and then $1.50 above that.
Do you have cost projections for any of
We do have cost projections. That's in that last email. I think it was 30,000 system-wide based on current degree amounts that people have. There would be some additional individuals that we don't know of at the moment that might have a degree that hadn't qualified previously. I don't think that number would be huge, but there might be, an additional couple thousand maybe for that. But what that would do is it would broaden and make that a little more uniform for folks.
So,
Yes.
I've got a couple different questions. Does everyone have this in their, or is that just is that an email? Jim sent this out on the cost per fund for, I think that's to bring everyone up to that's the low point, Jim, right? Right.
Yeah, I think Jim pretty much took our numbers that we had come up with and just fit them into kind of one of his standard reports.
So that would mean that just to the general fund, the total increase in cost would be $98,874.99, is that correct?
Well, let's take a look at that.
That's what.
Yeah, 98,874.99.
So with us just having our $100,000 leeway there, that would just wipe that out.
Now, as far as that number, I'm not sure where exactly that's coming from. I know we talked about a wage committee, we threw a lot of numbers out. We really haven't done an official capacity review yet. If you do the math, figuring in a jail project, for instance, and what the payments might be for that, and you figure in our property tax revenue, which has been above what we've been breaking even on operationally, there's a lot more than 100,000 that could be utilized specific to the general fund that might be available to us.
Well, the only thing is, at the AIC conference, and I was listening, so they were talking about the cushion that you need, and I think I'm pretty sure that that's where that's coming from as well, so it's.
We should have a
Especially-
cushion, yeah, considering
Especially with
inflation.
the recession that we're facing, I think that 1.4 million in the general fund is a good starting point.
It is, yeah, and we probably should maybe chart that out in general to see how we want to maintain that, or what kind of level we want to try to maintain as a goal. At some point, I think we should consider having some kind of, like a reserve policy, where we set parameters for certain types of funds and figure out what the bottom line lowest balance is that was ever acceptable, if that makes sense. There'd be a couple of things you'd want to consider with that, relating to the size of the budget and the use of the funds. So for instance, Riverboat is just kind of a one-time, money comes in, we don't really have a budget. So your reserve on that might be a little different in how you handle it than something like a general fund or, the sheriff's fund or whatever, because those are operational and have obligations throughout the year. But regardless of that, if we're breaking even right now based on income tax revenue, and you figure in 2 million plus on property tax, which is extra at this point, even if you were to shift things around from sheriff to figure in a jail project, you still have, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, $1 million available in capacity to help maintain that balance and have a cushion and still put money towards some of these issues like wages. I think we just need to chart that out and do a little bit more math to fit those pieces together.
Do you have any other? And one other separate discussion that we had at the wage study meeting was the need for, especially the recorder, to have a full-time person. So I think that was discussed, and it's at this point, she is the only one in that office, and it is imperative that she had someone there. So there were different discussions. Some departments were more concerned with their staff and the full-time person such as Loretta. Those were some of the different things that were discussed.
Yeah, to expand on that, if I may, there was discussion at that committee meeting about the restoration of positions that were cut previously. There already had been some movement in terms of, like, the treasurer and auditor had some there. Recorder had discussion. There was a little bit of a debate on the pros and cons of, do we look at number of people and capacity of employment? Do we look at the rate of pay for those positions, or a combination, of course, with those? But that was kind of a new element in the discussion that had been brought up, is restoration of the positions that might have been cut previously. So, and there's a cost to that, of course, but that could also be a budget hearing, discussion short of the recorder part. But that did get brought up in committee.
Nick?
I think as we talked in the committee, there was a mention of a couple offices, and you're talking about we're short-staffed. That has put a burden, and so are we looking across all the employees in the courthouse, giving them a raise or longevity? But then again, the finances Anton, I mean, I think the proof's in the pudding, I hear what you're saying, but I have figures right now that show us what we have. And we don't have the funds to take that liberty, I believe, of giving you raises right yet. I'm not saying I'm against those, I'm just saying you gotta be able to fund them, and that's an ongoing situation. So maybe it is best that we look at this at budget time, when we have 2 days to sit down and hack some figures out and see where we're at, and maybe even have better figures on where the county is and which direction we're going. Because at the AIC meeting, they did tell us figures showed, or was looking like we was heading in a recession. So here you have 8.6 inflation, and possibly bumping against a recession. I don't want to give anybody these raises and then next year come back and say, hey, guys, boy, we made a mistake. We're going to have to take a person out of each office again.
That is certainly something to be sensitive to. It would be a bit more, that scenario, if it plays out, would be delayed in timing. It would not be until a 2024 timeframe, the way income tax in Indiana works. So you're looking at 2023 earnings, which are settled up and collected for 24. But eventually, that could happen. You know, if you see a dip in income tax revenue because unemployment goes up and people are not earning as much and that kind of thing, eventually you'll see that dip.
Here's what I found.
And the other thing to be mindful of when you rely on income tax as your revenue source, it is a more volatile source of revenue, unlike property tax, which is fairly stable. But I think if you look a little bit more closely at the overall, if you take the property tax revenue into account, which up to this point, we've really not, there's enough resources to do some steps to help with raises and wages in the county. Now, we don't have enough to do the whole thing. And if you were to say, okay, we want to take everybody to the midpoint and do it all in one step, that would not be feasible at all, because that price tag is closer to $800,000. And that would be a very tough thing to implement and pay for. Plus, with the uncertainty, as you're mentioning, you know, do you want to commit to something like that? It certainly would be easy to make a motion and just do it and get it over with. But that's why we're looking at doing some things in steps and taking a little bit at a time and reevaluating. I don't think it's unreasonable to take some of these first steps and we'll still be in a good financial position to regroup and look at where things are at for 23. So that's just my opinion on it.
I think, go ahead.
I want to make a motion to give Loretta a full-time helper right now. I promised her in July, and that's what I think we can handle that, and that's the first one that we need to deal with, I think. So I want to make a motion to that.
Motion's on the floor. Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Nick.
Well, I certainly would be for that. I would really like for us to to set our baseline here. If that's $100,000, then let's set $100,000 and work backward from it with the priorities of this council and the county as a whole. You know, if we just start putting priorities out there and throwing them in, then the next thing you know, I'm afraid we're going to be above the baseline that we set. And I think, you know, again, Anton, I totally get what you're saying. I do think we need to slow roll this thing. You can look, LinkedIn's had several articles this week. A lot of people in positions like mine are getting laid off right now, and it's very concerning.
Well, I think I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I think that's a necessity for Loretta, and I think that's where we start.
I absolutely think I would vote for, shoring that up. All I'm saying is if we set the amount first, then I feel like we would know what we had to work with, but.
Yeah, Anton, I have a question for you.
Yes,
Based
sir.
on what you've gone through and what I've read, I really hadn't noticed, or I might have missed it. What was the percentage of those outside, excuse me. What was the percentage of the people outside the low range?
It's in the spreadsheet or the chart that summarizes that, and there was you have a hard copy. Of course, this has everything in it together, so there was a variety all over the map. There were some support positions, some of your C-level supports are not where they need to be, so there are some positions there that would be impacted. All of your part-time positions pretty much are in that category. There were a couple of leadership and supervisory type positions like jail commander, EMS, assistant director, there's kind of some of those positions that fit in there. But they total into that 125 figure.
So the 125 figure, because let me question you on the other figure. Your other figure was 800,000. Was that an accurate number to implement the whole thing?
That's for taking all positions to the midpoint,
To the
system-wide.
midpoint. Thank you, that's what I'm
Yes,
just right there.
that's a very good question, yeah. That does not count the cost of the longevity. but-
125,000 only covers getting people up to the low point, is that correct?
Correct, the ones that
Now,
aren't
we
there
don't
already.
cover adding another person and bringing them to the low point. And do we know if the former full-time person in the recorder's office was at the low point, or were they below the low point?
It was, the part-time that's there now is below the low point, so that is,
I'm speaking specifically of the full-time, because that's what the motion's
it
about.
was a level D support position, is that right? And it was a chief deputy too, which according to the report would be 85% of whatever the elected official would get paid eventually for next year. But it would be at whatever pay level it's at now in our current system. And if we did modify did the low point, if it's already above that, there wouldn't be any additional for it.
I was just curious because the motion's been made to go ahead and authorize it, but I don't know where it stands on that projection.
Yeah, it would be at the
because-
current rate of pay for a D support position. That part would be the same as it was before it was cut. So there wouldn't be any difference there.
Yeah, it still makes me interested though as to whether that is lower than the low point or is that above the low point? It's still an interesting,
Let me take a quick look if you give me a minute.
yeah, by all means.
So Earl, and you can say no, but what I'm asking for is, before we go to the store shop, let's set the amount that we're going to take with us, and then, that would be the first priority.
Well, I think you ought to take that out first and then
Then you
what we have left.
you have the motion on the floor and I'll vote for it, but.
I would agree more with Verl on that because I think,
That's a position that I feel that we're obligated to.
Yeah, but couldn't we do both in a single motion, set it at 125K plus the amount of the full-time person?
I keep it separate, to be
You wanna
honest.
keep them separate?
Yeah, I would.
And the,
That's the reason I made the motion, because
Oh,
I
I'm
think
with you there, I'm just trying to.
we need to handle that
streamline
first.
process.
We're
no,
good.
Give
so,
you your number real quick, Chuck, if I may, Polly, just to
Thank
make
you.
sure we're good here.
You know what, I'm glad it's my last year, because this chair sucks.
Yeah.
Change chairs.
Wouldn't matter, they all suck.
Your chief deputy. Okay. And while I'm looking this up to share my comments on the recorders thing, I don't have any opposition to it. I'm assuming you would not have the part-time then, is that a part of the proposal? It was just getting rid of the part-time and then replacing it with a full-time?
So I don't have a part-time now at all, anyway,
Okay,
so yes, right now. I
And some of that was funded out of perpetuation, correct?
Yes, and for the rest of this year, I can use what I have left, which is a little over $14,000.
so I would be inclined to support it if you are gonna vacate the part-time and you're not gonna fill part-time or anything with that, because that's still budgeted. That would have to be vacated. I know you don't have anybody in the position, but as far as technically, we would then eliminate or vacate any part-time that's associated with your office. We'd replace it with a full-time position, level D position. I would rather us utilize, at least for the balance of 22, utilize the perpetuation fund to cover that cost. But then for next year, then fold that back into the general fund or, get it back to where it was originally. Is that something you'd be okay with? I mean, I know the balance in that fund is usable for that and it's enough, but is that something you're okay with as far as what's being considered tonight?
So use what's left of my part-time for the rest of this year, but next year, see, for 2023, I am looking to maybe have part-time again.
Okay,
So I would use that out of my perpetuation.
got it, for 23,
Right,
For
so I
23.
wouldn't be using that for full-time.
got it. And would it be the same level that you have now for part-time? The same number of hours? You've got two people at 28 hours per week?
I would only want one part-time, I'm thinking 2 days a week, so.
So it'd be
hours
less.
go down, yes.
Got it. More like it was before, okay.
Yes.
So, but for 22 though, Loretta, would it be possible to make this work tonight?
Yes,
To vacate all part-time for the rest of the year, pay no more part-time?
yes,
Add the full-time,
yes,
pay for the balance of the year out of perpetuation for that full-time obligation, and then get us to 23.
yes, that is.
Got it.
everything.
So I'm gonna make that as an amendment to the original motion, that we're gonna vacate all part-time for the balance of 22, and that we're going to then fund this level D support position for the balance of 22 out of the perpetuation fund.
Can you clarify vacate? You're not actually talking about taking the positions off the roll, but just saying that those positions will not be held, that.
Basically vacating means for 22 that she would not have part-time anymore.
I
Yeah,
get that,
yeah.
but they're not being taken up the line items, so that's why I'm asking.
There's always gonna be the line items, but
Thank you.
it's gonna
I'm just
be,
making sure we're
yeah.
clear.
She may transfer, there may be, you said there's maybe some unused, so she may transfer
No,
to
that's
make it,
fine.
but it's gonna be out of that same fund.
You have a total cost for that.
Real quick, to answer Chuck's question, it looks like maybe level D might be $1,400 if you were to jump into the minimum part. So there may be some additional funds there that might come into play if that's voted on, but that's separate. Okay, what was your question, Andy?
Total cost,
The total cost for the recorder?
yes.
Okay.
For a full-time person.
I'm sorry, was that accepted was that amendment accepted by the friendly amendment, or was it?
We do need a second on that.
But I just want to know if there's enough in those before I
Accepted,
accept it.
that's fair. I just wanna make sure that we're still working on track here.
I don't want to,
I'm with you, don't worry. I just wanna make sure we're doing it right.
So a level D position. Per year is $30,502 in wages.
if there's 14,000 left, that wouldn't be enough.
She's also going to take her.
Right, she would,
additional part
yeah,
time.
she'd transfer the unused first,
For
and then
unused
she would
part-time.
appropriate out of the perpetuation.
Well, she had 2 part-time people that she does not have anymore. So she had budgeted for that.
Well, then there's that.
She's still got money in that because until the end of the year. So she would take that balance plus her.
That's motion.
It's awful close. 14,000 would be very close to half of what we're seeing for a full year.
I think, I don't know if the pro rata and that part is really a big issue, to be honest. If she's using her perpetuation fund and the end result is having a full-time instead of the part-time, it doesn't really matter. She'll transfer what's unused first, because we already budgeted that. But then if there is an additional appropriation needed to take her to December 31st, we would do that and make up that difference.
Okay,
And it really wouldn't be that much, and we're talking, this is the middle of July for crying.
Right. The only other part would be the health insurance component, but that's a 90-day roll-in, is that right? So even if you hired somebody quickly, then by the time that would kick in, you probably would have a very minimal amount, and that can be done out of perpetuation briefly for the end of the year, and we can probably settle up on that.
Okay,
Okay.
so are we ready?
So that's my motion for amendment.
We had a motion by Earl, amended by Anton.
We need a second for the amendment.
Or he can accept it as a
Right.
friendly amendment.
yeah, okay, I will.
So accepted as a friendly amendment, seconded by Nick. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, 2023 budget review and
Well,
discussion.
real quick here, before we move on, we need to look back at this system here. Andy said maybe setting a dollar amount might be a good idea and moving backwards from that. And I think that that's not a bad idea. If we truly have some limited resources and we want to be cautious, then I think the council should set, we know we're kind of committed because we all agree we want to do something. But I think if the council can provide some direction that we can then go back to the planning, we can say, okay, we have X amount that we're willing to do, that the council's agreed on. Now's the time to finalize those priorities. Do we want to just put it all into the minimum? Do we want to do a little bit of that? Do we want to just do longevity? Whatever it is within that limit, you want to utilize those resources to maximize it however people give their input on to do.
So the longevity would cost, what, 127,824, is that the current?
Longevity would be about 150,000 system-wide.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we are talking that we have $100,000 general fund is, okay, the
Then yes,
50,000
then you're on target there, Polly, because the total for the general fund is the 98. That includes the longevity and the bringing folks to the midpoint. And if you look at that, that would give a pretty broad group of employees. Everybody would have something in some respect. You might have a situation where for folks that are already at the 20 cents, longevity won't really apply. But if they're not at the minimum low point, then they'll have something from that. You'll have a combination where some employees have both. And we can formalize that for the next meeting to make sure everybody's on the same page. But I think if you set a limit first, we can make sure we come back with something that fits that limitation.
I think it's important, I mean, that we keep that 1.4 million in the general fund, but we also ran into problems with the sheriff's budget and the highway department's budget on being able to sustain that.
Yeah, now sheriffs will be, that'll be limited because the deputies already are at 20. If you did longevity though, that's gonna add cost. But like I said, we're gonna have ultimately come back with an exact plan of how to fund and where to place things to meet that limit. So if we at least set a limit, then we can go back, for instance, say, okay, well then we need to move a position from the sheriff's fund to the general, or change up how we want to do highway to make that work.
I got a question on that. With the finances the way they are, you cannot move any of my funds to the general fund. If you're going to maintain 1.4 minimum, if you're talking about a future jail project, which we just, I believe we, now at Creston facility, we've saved over $1 million as of right now, I believe that's what Jim said. If you're gonna maintain that $1.4 billion minimum, you cannot take anything out of my budget and move to the general fund. You can't support it. Not yet. Not for the next, probably till 2024. So what me and Chief Deputy has worked on, and I said this in the last meeting, looking to say, you cannot afford to give my people raises. You don't have the money. We're being realistic, okay? You don't have the money. So we're taking our budget, we've been working on this, and you'll have a proposal by Friday for all of you to read before you come to your August meeting, that I will generate enough money from my department alone, to substantiate and sustain raises for my department for the next 3 to 4 years. That will get you in some leeway until you see what the general fund is going to be in 2023, 2024. Now, we know between us two and that we're going to have to really cut our budget. We're talking about vehicle rotation, we're talking about doing this and doing that, and so on and so forth. But in order for me to maintain my employees, I've lost 6 full-time officers in the last year. I've lost 16 full-time officers in almost 8 years. I've lost 60 jailers. Okay, so just going to the road deputies, when you calculate how much money we've spent on these individuals, training, so on and so forth, the amount we've spent on that is far more than what we're going to be asking for. But we're realists. We know that the general fund cannot support raising. So we're taking our budget, we've been working on, Matt's been working on it day and night, we worked on today. And Friday, you'll have a proposal in front of you that you got 3 weeks, and I hope when we come to August, you'll look at that and you'll say, that works, we're going for it. We'll sustain it, but it has to come from my budget. We're already behind in fuel, we're behind in meals, and stuff like that. You can't take anything from my budget and start spending it out of your general fund. Jim's made it perfectly clear for the last year, and he went to the conference, we have to have $1.4 million to back up the jail project. That has to be maintained. So we're just gonna take our budget, cut where we can. We've got a meeting again Thursday with all of our employees to discuss what we're going to do, what kind of proposal we're gonna have for the council that you can look at. Because we've done this all year long, the other departments has come here and offered up their money to give their employees raises. Courthouse, the judges did, and I think, Chris is doing Frisbee. We're going to do the same. I knew this day was coming several years ago. So we've been kinda hanging on to our money, so to speak, because the last thing I want is for the next sheriff to come in and the chief deputy have to worry about giving raises to the employees over the next 2 or 3 years. We'll handle it, we'll deal with it, we'll see what the max is going to be, and we'll be able to sustain that for the next 3 to 4 years. Until your general fund gets built up to where you can say, okay, we've got some money here, the jail project's gonna work, and you have extra money to spend on certain things, because you have no idea what money you're gonna need for other projects that could come up.
So, back to Anton, because I will tell you, no one suggested taking money, or at least I didn't hear anybody suggest taking money from you to the general for any of this.
No, he just said that we may have to spend some money out of the general fund to cover my budget. You can't do that.
Yeah, so
That's
there's confusion here, let's clear it up. You can't look at the 1.4 million balance and base your decision on that. That has nothing to do with operational capacity, it's a totally different thing. So look at Jim's reports. Every month he says, we're pretty much breaking even, pretty much, based on income tax revenue alone, okay? And I'm talking general fund for a moment, so follow me here. Property tax revenue normally for the general fund is a couple of $1 million, okay, per year that we've not obligated, okay? Now, we know that at some point, when we have a jail project, we're gonna have some kind of a project plan with a cost and some kind of projection for a payment, some kind of a loan that we're gonna be paying back. Now, if we do 15 million, and I'm just using this as an example, but if we use 15 million based on a 6% interest rate over 20 years, then that payment per year is gonna be $1.3 million, okay? Well, if you earmark that 1.3 out of the sources that you would use to spend for that jail project, which would include the jail facilities fund and the public safety tax fund that your budget is fully funded from now, you take that 1.3 million and get that total together. You move the rest of it out of the public safety lid into the general fund. You still have plenty of operational capacity to fund raises and adjustments for employees. There's plenty of money, but, so I'm saying, we can't go the full 800, 900, whatever, but we can do a couple of first steps that are in that $100,000 to $200,000 range. I think it's doable, in my opinion. But you've gotta look at the unused budget capacity, less the obligation for the jail facility, and you'll see where the numbers do help in allowing us to take some steps forward on raises.
I just don't, it makes absolutely no sense to me if you're gonna have a payment of $1.3 million. The correctional facility money brings in $800,000.
Right, so now you're down to 500,000.
If you're gonna allocate that out of the public safety tax, that means you have to take $500,000 from my budget and pay it out of the general
Yes,
fund.
and we would take more than that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense.
You'd move it
But
over to the general fund.
what I would like to do, I know it's called kicking the can, but what I would like to do is wait, it's like 3 weeks or something on the budget. I would like to make a motion that let's put a hold on this till we get the budget lined out, and then we'll know the exact figures on what we can do. And that's
Well,
pretty simple.
I can go with that, I have no problem with that, because I do
You
think,
can't guess money if you don't know what each department has gotta come up
It's
with.
premature.
I
Yeah,
second that motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really think we
Motion
need
made
to-
by her.
I think we're all in, I'm good with it, and
People are doing what we asked, so do we need a motion?
And I'm assuming you'll take a friendly amendment, Verl, that puts a pause on any wage-related requests.
Yes.
From now moving forward. I don't want people keep coming to our
You
meeting.
can't spend money if you ain't got it.
Yeah, I think if it needs more time, you give it more
Know
time.
what where we're standing. I really do.
And we can chart it out and we can talk about these numbers and have plenty of time to
Right, each
discuss.
department can come up with their solution and think about it, and that's where we can come from.
That's what you're gonna have to do because you.
That's right.
have Departments that has no choice.
I can't make any money.
Do what?
I have no extra money. The treasurer cannot make money for the treasurer's office.
Right, I know, we got to figure out what it is.
Well, in our meeting, we were told not to come back in with the numbers from last year. We wanted good numbers.
What we want, that's what we want. We wanna know what Jim's can live with. That's my view. I wanna know what Jim's can live with for the year.
So
I know this
I have no
a
money.
fuel tax and stuff, I mean, this fuel cost is hard to figure and it's hard to plan. But the rest of this, you have to run your offices long enough that you know what you can get by with, and that's what we gotta go by, I think.
And I agree with what you're saying, because we've discussed this several times, and you made it perfectly clear that with the departments, the budget that we have, even though we went through all this last year, we still gotta make sure that we cut everything that we can cut, in order to utilize that money that we're cutting to benefit our employees.
That's exactly right.
Is that correct? I mean,
That's not what you asked.
2 points, please. First point, the treasurer's point is that she has nowhere to cut to create and come back in here to add or pay somebody.
Right.
The second point I have is what were all these numbers we were given earlier about 125,000 across system-wide to do longevity, or to bring up the low point, and the $30,000 to do the educational fund based on 50 cents for an AA, 50 cents for a BS, and 50 cents for anything above that. Are these numbers not the numbers you put together?
Those are numbers, but that's what he's proposing we put a pause on so we can figure up the larger financial picture moving forward. Because Andy proposed a limit, and we don't know exactly where that limit really falls. So that's why Verl is acting to delay.
So he wants more clarification.
I think so.
Other than these numbers that have been presented to us.
Not so much those numbers, but on the revenue side.
I wanna know
On the
what
revenue.
we're gonna have to give to these.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand this because we've been going for a little bit. Jim's numbers, which support the fact that we may have a $200,000 place to start with, which aligns with at least two of these items that I'm looking at here. You need more clarification.
Yes.
I think his numbers were more like 100,000. And that's why I suggested setting the limit, but I'll go along with whatever, but I do think that, I don't know, Jim, is that number likely to change?
I apologize. Which number?
The $100,000 number of,
No, because what you have now, at least as of 2 days ago, you had roughly $1.3 million in the general fund. That had not been the 200,000 coming in. So when the 2 comes in, you're gonna have 1.5 million, but you're still gonna have a payroll. You're still gonna have a claim cycle left in the year, but you're also gonna have some scattered in. So roughly, you're going to have about 283 come in this month. It's a little bit premature to guess out as far as the expenses, but the short answer is around 1.514 appears to be where Owen County is based on the past 2 months and based on the past 6 months' expenses. I don't see any more. I don't see a 1.6, 1.7 at all. I think you're talking about 1.5, 1.4, 1.3. 1.4 is an industry standard. That's where this 100,000 discretionary income is it could be discussed.
Right, and
Let
not
me-
counting settlement in December.
No.
Let me make something clear. We're talking 100,000 above for everything, for anything that might come up. I mean, I feel like we're talking, once again, we're trying to live paycheck to paycheck, and we can't do that because that's where we got ourselves in this problem to begin with. If we spend that, if we have decided that 1.4 million is where we need to stay to have our cushion, and we have $100,000 leeway, and we spend that because we've spent it many times over here on our discussion, then we're gonna be right back where we started.
that's why I'm asking.
But again,
to set
that's-
the
yeah.
budget.
But that's using cash balance as your only indicator, and that's not really correct. That's not really, you've got to take into account your revenue. And there's gonna be more revenue before the end of the year. There's capacity there. Now, I will agree, it's gonna be somewhere between 100,000, and I think it's gonna be somewhere upwards of 5 to 6, okay? But I think it's worth pausing to give an opportunity. There's no harm in doing that, in my opinion. That's why I'm in favor of this motion. And I think Andy's suggestion of setting a limit is ultimately the place we need to be when we go back to revisiting this. So there's 2 steps here, if that makes
And if
sense.
we can do that in 3 weeks, great.
And I'm in favor of that because I think we are stepping in the right direction if we give the diligence to doing this. So that's why I'm in favor of that motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I get a clarification? Because was there?
So I made a friendly amendment that all separate wage requests between now and then are paused. So we
You
don't,
mean anything else tonight would be,
if there's any other wage increases, and so if we're gonna put a pause on this and tackle it, then we don't need to have separate requests between now and then either.
I need one more clarification, Anton.
Yes.
So if a department comes in with a solution that they're willing to work within their department to create an ability to enhance their employees' revenue, personal revenue, that's now on hold, that's what.
Well, they're
is that what the
probably-
motion is?
There won't be another meeting in 3 weeks anyway, but yeah, by then, by August, we'll know a lot more, and then maybe we can revisit that. But I think we wanna put a pause on it for now to get the financials.
Okay, so if a department were to come up before us in the next hour and say, hey, I found a way that we can transfer and we agree that this is sustainable and that this is not gonna, we're not gonna use this particular item henceforth so that our people could be, made to increase closer to the low point.
Right, well,
We're not gonna listen to that based on this motion.
I'd personally wanna wait. Now, if you don't agree with that, you can do that differently, but yes, you're right, that is correct.
It's a simple yes or no. Can they come tonight, if they've come tonight, to say to us, hey, we found a solution, can we do it? Does this motion say, no, they cannot do that from here on out? That's all I wanna know, it's a simple yes or no.
We had asked all the departments to do. We had asked them, if you can find a way and we don't have to.
That's not answering the question I have. Does this
If they
motion
can.
say, no, now you cannot speak to us tonight?
Yes, in my motion, I want to. That's
See, I
what
didn't
my
understand
intention
that.
was.
So
This
your
is
motion
new.
says that nobody can present anything tonight until we have.
I would like, because I don't wanna base our decision on something that we don't know yet.
And this is new requests that have not been made.
I'm just wondering how in the world we could be such hypocrites when we went and asked these people
That's
to
what I'm
go and
saying.
check out there and do everything they possibly can, and now we're gonna say, sorry, guys, forget it. You
Jeff,
don't
I was
get to
agreeing with
present
you.
it.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. We had asked departments, if you can come up with a way, do it. Remember when we
well,
started
I'm
with the
thinking
circuit
we have
court?
at least two other areas tonight that it's going to be brought up. I think the highway department and the corners.
Yeah, but if this motion gets passed, then we'll be able to do anything.
So, okay, so I don't want it to be controversial, so I'm gonna withdraw that friendly amendment. No one anybody's welcome to present. But remember, the council already voted to proceed in doing a comprehensive plan and not separating things out. So we already have that vote that we took back in April. And we've had wage committee meetings and we've been stepping forward with that, especially with our last wage meeting. So that's the track that the council has voted on. And yes, if someone can pay for parts of that
But
to
the track
make
of the council also includes.
I know it's
your
been
house,
messy.
where you
Yes, it
said
has, Chuck. It has been messy. Yes, totally correct.
I just
But-
don't want to tell these people, hey, you know what, you did the work, if it's fair and it's reasonable and it's sustainable, that's my key clue. Sustainable, that we say, no, sorry, have a good night.
Well, I'm not gonna make that any part of the thing then. That's not the intent. But I do support the pause on getting the financial review in order, so.
For the compensation package stuff, the wage study,
Yes,
that's reasonable.
Yes.
I think what,
But if they move closer to moving towards the low point, I think they should be heard.
well, yeah, and I think it's gonna be more than that, Chuck, but, yeah. That's system-wide versus separate departments, so.
Yeah, but if separate departments are able to come and say, okay, and we know what those low numbers are in each of those departments, and they don't bust the low, or they bust simply only the low or lower, why wouldn't we wanna be able to help them out?
And
I
I
mean, we all know where we're going in this country for a full-on recession. You see gas prices at $5 a gallon. I don't even know how some people can do it. I live below poverty wage as a vet on disability, and I can't afford fuel. And and listen, I'm not complaining, I'm glad to be a councilman, but we don't get paid money here, okay? We make less than them, and we make less than the coroner does. I'm just pointing it out, not picking on you. I love you to death, you.
Can I ask?
Madam Chair,
Okay.
So when you guys decided to change April the 8th, I believe it was, the ARPA money request, it was approved by the commissioners as long as the courthouse employees or that list of 19 people got raises. Now we're at the point that it's not looking like that's gonna happen. Is that going to change the ARPA plan? Is that an option? Is that, because that was why, that's why it was approved to change it to loss of revenue instead of the individual buckets that they were originally approved in the first couple of plans in February and March. Just a technical question, because that matters on how we're entering things in ARPA, how I think that's some of the reasons we don't have our funds yet, is because we changed our plans and having to go from the individual buckets that were there versus, okay, we're looking at this. So I'm just asking for technical, and I think it's an issue, and everybody, the majority of the employees' names that are on that list of 19 all thought that after tonight and further discussion, that our departments were gonna get raises. And I know Chris has worked hard, and I have a request on here tonight, and Greg has finagled some of his funds around to try to make this happen. I think we at least need to be heard. That's,
Yeah, I think we've
agree
made
on
that
that.
determination, we're not
I
gonna
agree with that.
amend anything to that respect. We can hear those requests, so that's not an issue.
I wasn't sure. But you also excuse me for a
Great.
couple minutes, I'll be back. My vote's abstention, just.
Excuse me, I'm gonna echo Sheila, but I believe we were given instructions to work
Mhm.
off the list, and there were people from the courthouse that would be included in a raise tonight, which is now the term that we use, kick to the side to the can. But the highway department, not being funded out of the general fund, we put together a plan in order to go forward, because we have to stand alone, because I have 2 staff members that haven't had a raise like the courthouse in years. So we worked toward that, and we could fund that ourselves, because
And
we're not included. What has to happen is there has to be a decision made whether we're gonna go forward or not, so the employees quit being strung along, because they're getting angry, they're getting frustrated, because they believe something is going to happen, and everybody understands the numbers, we all understand the recession. I don't think we're going to a recession, I think we're in a recession now. But we have to be honest with our employees. If this isn't gonna happen in 3 weeks, then council, just tell us that it's not gonna happen. And then the employees have to make the decision, can we stay at Owen County or must we move on? Because they have to do what's best for themselves. You only work for one reason. We don't work for fun. We work to take care of our families and to provide, and if they can't do that, then they need to be able to make an honest decision to move on, if that's what they need to do. And I feel like we just keep throwing a fishing line out here and reeling it in. It's the same way with the budget. I'm gonna echo with Sam. We have worked on our budget. In fact, we presented one, we'll pull it back, and we'll represent in regard to our employees, so I can work with some raises inside my department. They might be minute, but to try to get that through the highway budget, because I don't see where it's gonna come from anywhere else. But if it stands tonight, I think we don't discuss it again until budget time, because we are going nowhere and everybody is becoming extremely frustrated.
And I understand that, and I have been in favor of each department coming and being, as long as it didn't take out of the general fund, and being able to fund that. And I appreciate the work that you've put into this, and you have presented a good proposal, and I think it should be heard. What I was not in favor of is the system-wide, where different places were not gonna, wasn't going to be sustainable, until we're able to look at that a little bit further. But I feel like if you're, if, like you have done, and you presented a plan that it's not gonna take out of the general fund, then I think you should definitely be heard.
Here's the thing, we have a motion and a second, we need to deal with it.
Okay, let's, once again, on your motion for,
Well, I didn't know that Ken's told them all to be here tonight, for one thing. So if they've got ways to figure it out and stuff and all that, but I do, I'll withdraw my motion. But they need, on their budgets, they need to figure out to where we can plan ahead. If they've got ways of paying it the way with their system now, that's fine with me too, if everybody agrees with it. But what I'm against is I don't want to say, yeah, we're gonna give these a raise and all that stuff, and then we come up and we don't have the money to pay them. I don't like that. I don't wanna promise them nothing, but if they've got ways of doing it, that suits me fine, but everybody keeps saying, you know, come across the board and come up with a percentage, raise them all. We ain't got the money, you can't pay it. So, but if you got ways of doing it, go for it.
So you're withdrawing your motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, the alternative to that is setting a limit now and taking some kind of action so we have direction for the employees. We need to do something to move forward, or we're gonna keep this same cycle of mixed signals and jerking employees around. I'm sorry to say that way, but it's been going on for the whole year now. Every meeting, we have the same discussion over and over and over again with no resolution. And we know that we cannot pay for the entire thing to be done in one step. There's no way. So you've got to have some kind of a plan that outlines the steps to take to get you to your goal. And we are struggling with that. I'm just being honest. We're trying very hard, I know, but we have a long ways to go to get there, and I don't want to see us taking steps backwards. The first half of the conversation tonight was very promising, and I was in favor of that motion to give enough time for people to get a little bit more comfortable with the financial status so we can proceed forward with a solution that's system-wide. But if we're gonna revert back to the every meeting someone new comes to us wanting money method, I am totally against that. I always have been against that, and we're just setting ourselves for continued failure. That's what has to stop. Our council's been doing this for the last 3 and 4 years. We have got to break that cycle. That's not a sustainable way of doing business, and it's not fair to our employees. And that's just my opinion, and I respect my fellow colleagues on this, but I don't see where we're ever gonna make progress on this if we don't actually seriously do something to move in this direction.
I think what we're
So-
trying to keep from doing is because we came from $1.2 million in the red.
Right?
And we don't want to get back to that, so we want to be we want to do this right.
Oh, I agree. I don't think
And
that's
that
the,
was-
yeah.
And that was over the last 5 years.
So in setting an amount of money, and I can ask Jim, do you see, yes or no, do you see the amount, the $100,000 that you have told us during the wage meeting and tonight changing significantly?
No, let me use the methodology. The reason I say no, I'm using 100% cash balance. I'm dealing with the reality of today. I'm not making projections due to the vitality, but we could do that. But as of tonight, following any industry standard of any type, anyone you want to look at, you've got 1.5 in there, 1.4 is your safe reserve. Obviously, that's $100,000. I think as of this date, July 11th, the county council, as far as cash balance, has roughly $100,000 of discretionary spending, whether you want to save it or spend it out. But I think that is an appropriate number based on cash balance.
And that's year to date, which is half a year.
Year to date, it is up today.
Yeah, so you have double that essentially, capacity-wise, if you were to put that towards this particular project. And I would tend to agree with that. that's, I think it's more than that, to be honest, if you figure the rest of the revenue that's gonna come in for the year, which is still within reason of doing what's been proposed. And again, this is only a first step. Remember, the overall goal is to get everybody to the midpoint, that we still need to work towards that. But as far as taking some steps and getting it off our list and knocking out some of the problems that we've had for years, that's what I believe we should do, is step towards that.
Come up with
Madam
the-
Chair,
Sorry, yes.
Andy came up with a great idea. I'd like to make a motion that we cap $125,000 tonight, and that's it. I mean, we're gonna deal with any of these
I'll
issues.
second that motion.
Motion's made by Nick to cap at 125,000, seconded by Andy.
And that's to, you're focusing on the general fund as your baseline?
Yes.
Okay.
General fund.
Other funds, we just work with what we have or figure out what to do.
These other people, if the highway department has money, I'm gonna listen to them tonight, and deal with them accordingly to their financial ability.
So, motion's on the floor. Yes.
Jim, can I ask you a question, sir? You say that the industry standard 1.4, well, that's basically 10% of our budget for the year. So would it, in order for us to maintain a 1.4 cushion, can we legally set some sort of goal, or just it has to be a consensus?
Well, you as a council could set, like, this is a reserve, we're not going to define.
That's what I mentioned earlier with the.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed it clearly.
Yeah,
Right.
you can only do that, like and I'm just gonna make up a number, but if you decide, as a county council, we do not want it to get under $1.4 million, that's the discretion of the council.
Isn't our current year budget 14.1? Is that, am I mistaken?
It's more than that. It's 16.2
It's
or something like that.
So I think we should set a 10%.
Yeah, and that's where the reserve policy needs to be drafted, but we need to take into account maybe a couple different terms, time periods, there's between now and the end of the year versus 23.
I'm just trying
We're still trying to
I'm
strengthen
just trying to
that.
calculate from what we just spoke about, what we want to transition to.
Well, she is with her part-time in the perpetuation fund.
And this 1.3 number is
Yeah,
something
for
that is outside of the.
For 23, we know we're gonna go expend this.
Fine, I'll vote.
General fund guideline.
I'll vote for that then. I don't want it.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I vote.
All those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay.
So are you, I don't, be devil's advocate at all. Are you just going to wait before you start utilizing, you got some stuff on the table that you spend $125,000 on right now? Is them decisions that you're gonna make tonight or wait? Because for me and Greg, it's simply, what we're trying to do is make a proposal where it doesn't affect your general fund.
Well, that's a very good, how about, I'll make a motion that now that we have some council direction on a limit for the general fund, which is our biggest concern, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion that we set our next wage committee meeting to utilize that cap and reprioritize where that money should be allocated, and then come back for action at our next meeting.
To the exclusion of anything that these guys have done to bring forward to us, correctly?
Well, it depends on what action. If we take action on what's being
Based on what
requested
they said,
tonight,
something
that would be
different.
subtracted out of the total, like EMS, for instance, and that kind of thing. But as far as assuming none of that's done, we have our limit.
I did have, the recorders subtracted out of that in my mind, is that?
And that's fine, we already did that. So, but I'll make a motion that we proceed in setting up our next committee meeting to take in this cap into account and reevaluate priorities on where those resources should be put towards the compensation project.
So the 125,000 that we just set the cap for, you are wanting to just have that expended for employee compensation and nothing else, is that correct?
It could be positions, it could be employee, it could be longevity pay, it could be bringing people up to a certain,
But it
I didn't think it
but it
about.
pertains to the compensation wage study itself.
That's what that was
My
about.
question is if, I mean, on that 125,000, I mean, we have increased costs in utilities, we have increased costs in fuel, we have increased costs in, the meals of and we also have some other issues coming on farther down. Is that, I mean, are you wanting to include that 125,000 for all expenses or just for employee compensation?
It was for employee compensation. Is that right, Nick?
I apologize.
Your
Sorry,
motion,
asking him a question.
your motion for the cap was in light of the compensation proposals.
Yes.
We already voted on that, so.
Okay. And we're gonna have a hard time keeping it that 1.4 million.
well.
And again, that's a cash
I-
balance.
Whenever I inquired about this, that, on what we would have for discretionary spending towards wages, I thought that's where the 100,000 was. Jim, is that not?
That's for
You have a cash balance of 1.5. If a made-up building falls down tomorrow, and you have to spend $100,000, you pay it, you have 1.4 million. This is a cash balance. How you determine or how you want to distribute that 100,000, or in this case, 125,000, you want the financial body, it is total 100% within your discretion. But the cash balance is going to reflect that. Money coming in, it goes up, money coming out, it goes. If it goes down 125,000, it's going to now be 1.4 rather than 1.5.
Yeah, that was not made clear, but. Okay, let's
So,
move.
is there anything else, Paula, you need? I wanna make sure we're all on the same page, because Nick's motion was to set the cap in relation to compensation for employees, and we voted unanimously to do that. Are we still comfortable with that?
As to what? I mean,
I don't know, Polly had a concern.
I was just thinking the 125,000 was a cap on our spending to keep it at 1.4 million. So that's,
For my
no,
thing
no,
that
no,
came.
that's why I asked if we could set legally that course. But since his motion's done, why don't we just take another motion? Let's set the, well, I think it should be a targeted goal of this budget to have a certain amount of cash always consistently on hand, that we do not go beneath that. And I think we should set it at,
that would be more.
if not
what it would be.
1.4 million, to at least 10% of the budget.
Well, I would, there needs to be, okay.
Your motion's still on the floor.
Oh, yes, my motion was still on the floor, okay.
I'm
I
sorry,
forgot
did you
about
have a motion on the floor?
The motion was to set a wage committee thank you, Sheila. To set a wage committee meeting in order to take in our new cap into account and reorganize our priorities for the wage structure.
Who seconded?
We need a second.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded.
And do we want to set go ahead and get that advertised and set a date? Did we do Monday, we did a Monday morning at 9 the last time, does that still work? Maybe the 25th? Is that enough time for 2 weeks out?
Yeah, they did it advertised.
Does that work for you, Polly, the 25th?
25th of,
Monday, July 25th?
I will not be here.
How about,
I
we're,
have one question, Sheila, on the, was it the DGLF budget
yeah, that's
meeting, when is
Tuesday,
that?
She changed that on Friday, the new meeting is on the 22nd
Okay,
at 2:30.
22nd.
So if you wanted to call a meeting 5, 6 o'clock or prior to,
And that was on Friday the 20th, and there's still enough time for advertisement there.
Yes, because I already have that meeting advertised.
And it was at 2 p.m.
2:30.
2:30. We could do it after that, would that be good? Because we know a
Okay,
lot more.
I'm gonna
from
be
that.
coming from Oklahoma, so I will do my best to get here in time.
And you said Monday will not work, Polly?
No, I won't be here Monday.
What about just Tuesday, the 26th,
Yeah, that would work,
9 o'clock?
okay.
Because then what we pick up in our work session with DLGF, that might be helpful in determining some financial stuff too.
I gotta check out a couple things on that, but I'll try to be.
So before we vote, the motion was to set a wage committee meeting taking into account the recent cap. And we're looking at Tuesday, July 26th at 9. Or, 9 AM.
So that was, motion was made and you seconded, Chuck, correct? Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so are we just now down to the 2023 budget preview?
I thought,
Then he was talking about the minimum.
yeah,
I was thinking about making a motion
Minimum.
towards, let's go ahead and have it, but I'll make it, I'll make a motion that we go ahead and set a limit for a cash balance maintenance of 1.4 million as a base, and hopefully to increase that to 10% of the budget.
Motion made by,
Okay, let me ask a question.
Hmm.
If our finances get to the point that we get 10% of the budget, is that when it will be set?
Yes, yeah, that's fair, I'll make, yeah, that
So
makes sense.
say that again, Nick.
Whenever our finances get to the place that the 1.4 would get to 10% of the budget, that we'll cap it at the 10%.
Yeah, you wouldn't wanna go more than 10%.
Which could be a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever it may be.
Yeah. We're not gonna be like the state where they hold on at 1.2 billion or 1.8 billion dollars over our heads.
So we're, until the, and you're talking the general fund, or are you talking all funds, or what?
I think that, isn't that where our cash balance is? Yeah, the general fund, yeah.
So just general fund. So it wouldn't apply now.
The 1.4 would.
The
That would-
1.4 would,
Okay.
but that we increase it to 10% as time goes by. I mean, eventually what's gonna happen is, given the increases that Jim is talking about, it's possible that it goes to the point where we get to a 10%. But our goal should always be 10% of our budget left behind for a real and true emergency. I mean, look at example for 2009, everybody remember what happened in 2009, we lost the freaking bridge.
So what you're saying is, in the near term, what we're doing is establishing a floor.
Exactly, a forward point, so from 1.4, the goal is to increase it to 10% of the budget.
And has someone seconded that?
Yeah.
Nick did?
did you second it? Okay, motion made and seconded. Any other discussion?
Well, my concern is at the moment, as fluid as finances are, I'm not sure setting a limit right now is a good idea. We do need a reserve policy, but I think it's something that takes a little bit of time to research and look at the different, it's not just a general fund thing necessarily, there's some other operational funds like edit, and those types that we might want to make sure we maintain with some kind of a policy. And only 10% is like 5 weeks worth of the year, and if you're looking to get to some kind of a general accepted reserve, it's more than 1 month that you'd wanna store back for,
But this is a good
I'm
place
sorry,
to
did you
start.
not, Jim, say that that was standard
The-
1.4 million?
Well, based on the size of Owen County for the general fund,
Yes.
you'll find, from Barnes, Peters, Crow, everyone is in total agreement that you want at least a $1.4 million reserve in your general fund as a minimum.
And I believe that was my motion, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. And it was seconded.
and you're saying minimum
Minimum 1.4,
1.4.
hopefully to increase to a 10% of the total budget. Keeping it in liquidity here in the general cash. If we're at a 16, I can't remember the number you said, Polly, but it was a 16 million. So that would be a 1.6 million at 10%.
So, but the 16 million though is not the general fund, that's the whole of county government.
Yes. but
Highway
even-
and-
Yes, but even it's still 1.4 million is 9% of our current budget.
So you
See what
wanna,
I'm saying?
so you wanna base the minimum reserve of the general fund on a total that applies to all funds.
Why wouldn't?
I'm not sure that's really a good idea financially.
I'll withdraw and restate. I'd like to set the minimum in the cash balance based on the recommendation of Lau and all these other people that the county attorney has said at 1.4 million.
I second.
Motion made and seconded.
I'll call for a vote.
All right, all those in favor?
And that's for general fund only?
Yes, general fund only.
Got it.
All right, motion carried. Okay, now, 2023 budget preview and discussion.
Everybody was just looking for direction tonight on where you wanted to go, or are we putting, are we requesting midpoint, or is that off the table now? Is that just fill it in and those adjustments will be made when budget hearings start on the 10th? We have to advertise high, but realistically, if everybody's putting in there that midpoint and or requesting increases between now and then, yeah, obviously, it's just a wish list. So if you guys want them to use that medium point, because that would be the max if we ever did figure out if it could happen. If not, at least we advertised high enough.
Right,
I think as long as we advertise high, whatever numbers people wanna put in there and talk about, let them talk about it. At the end of the day, we're gonna be limited on what we can do with revenue and some of the priority obligations, so things will just have to be dialed back if need be, like we normally do, right?
all right, let's move on to holiday pay. We've got to get this knocked out. This has been kicked around forever. We voted to, instead of having that paid back, to bring everybody up to what was the ones that did not get the increased holiday pay. Do you guys want to discuss that, or?
So, there were a couple, this concerns just a couple of leftover employees where the numbers needed to be figured for the one-time correction, is that correct?
The list of the original employees that received it, again, all of them that are on the holiday pay. You guys voted to not have them pay it back, thus then it's been brought back to pay all the others the same 4 hours that those all got paid. Those all that got paid were not actually working those days, so they're looking at all of EMS and 911 to get those 4 hours.
Right, cause it's a holiday pay liquidation, so they don't have, it's not a matter of them working on the day or not, they just
Correct.
get it. But I think the action we took a few months ago was to honor that first quarter where the mistake was made, give them under the old policy, make sure they were paid or made whole for that quarter. And we already voted on doing that for a long list of individuals, and it was mostly for, some had 8. And we already took action on that. So what's left? Is there a couple of employees that didn't get fixed in that?
The list that was given by 911, sheriff, and EMS were tabled that night. You guys did not go through those. The only thing that was agreed on because some of them were figured at 8 hours because we weren't sure. So your guys' vote that night was to give all of the other employees the 4 hours per that policy. Those lists have not been created yet, because the question was, is it all employees or was it just the employees that were actually on duty? My understanding was it was all of them.
Yeah, it should be all of
Would be a
them.
significant amount. So,
Do you have the amount?
yeah,
Well-
if you wanna table it tonight, we will get with the three of them and Sherry and have the exact numbers that will be for each one of those three departments at your meeting on August the 10th. It'll be in old business, cause your meeting starts out.
And,
Recommend we go with that.
yeah, because I don't know if we have enough information right now to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll make a motion that we postpone the one-time holiday pay review to our August meeting.
So when this works itself out, will it be okay with all those people?
Yes.
Because it will have to
Okay,
come
so
out.
this won't be an issue anymore.
The current policy is already what it is, and the budget is set to fit that, so that's never changed. But there was a mistake made back during this quarter, which was soon after the change was made, where some employees were overpaid and some were not. And so I think the intent at the time was to go ahead and make sure that the ones that got it by mistake do not have to pay it back. That's the first part. The second is in fairness to the ones that didn't get the mistaken amount under the old policy, we would also pay them up to make it all even. And I think that's the part that the motion is to postpone to August.
I'll second it if you add in there that all numbers that are provided at next month's meeting are complete, accurate, and done and
Final, correct, that's fine.
okay, I'll
It
second.
should never come up again. Famous last words,
We'll
right?
call for a vote. Okay.
All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, corner staff compensation.
This was tabled from, they had requested in one of the meetings to be paid the part-time rates as well due to the hours that are in there. You guys tabled that conversation per Jim in that meeting, they do not qualify.
Time, okay,
No, it wasn't for part-time, it was for the bonus.
yeah, the,
Right, but those, the 800, their part-time people don't meet the 800 minimum hours that is required for the
Well, they do meet
ARPA
the
funds.
800, they do meet the 800 required hours, but not technically. So like everything else, we don't quite hit the mark on anything.
You guys
But
tabled
because
it,
they're not paid, because they're not hourly employees, even though they work more than 800 hours, they didn't get the bonus that everybody else, that all the employees got.
why, I've got a question, and you may have answered this before, but why did they go from hourly to per case? I mean, what was the reasoning on that?
I don't remember what year, it's probably been close to 20 years ago that they went.
No, it was back in 2011, we actually did that, 2010. The reason being is because when you did a case and you were being paid $8 an hour, it took 2 hours to touch the dead body, pick it up, put it in a body bag, run it down to the refrigerator, stick it in there, write the report, then have to transport the body the next day to the pathologist. And that was a very minimal amount of money, which roughly came out to about $32 to do the service. Well, there was no way to bring them on board part-time and pay them anything more than that, because then you would have them on all the time, and it was an on-call job. So we raised it to $150 per case.
So it's
So
paid per
because
case.
so that we
Back
could
when it was
maintain.
paid it wasn't ever paid hourly.
Okay,
They were paid, like salary, part-time salary, so each deputy, back then there was 5 deputies, there was allowed to be 5 deputies, and they each got so much money per year. And then they broke that down to pay cycles, so they got like a check for $33 every pay period.
Exactly.
And then
Well,
whatever
nobody
the
wants
call,
to do this job for $33 every 2 weeks.
Exactly.
So then we would pay per case, because we couldn't get any deputies. And it started out at 150, we're now up to like 177.05 is the current rate. But that's not what this is talking about.
Right, and I understand that. I was
Yeah.
just curious on why, because I was assuming that it had started out as hourly and then put,
Yeah, it's never, to my knowledge, it's never been hourly,
Okay.
it was like like they took what the budget was for part-time and however many deputies, it was split between them for the full year. And that's
It
how,
was all of
Yeah,
them
well,
do
we
the
can never
same
keep-
amount of work.
Yeah, but we never keep the amount, we can never keep people to do the job. because it
yeah,
was-
so some people were getting paid that money too and never taking a case, where other people were doing all the cases and still only get $33.
That's what I just wondered, the 4 or 5 that's working part-time like that, does all of them work the same amount of time?
Well, currently I've only got 3 deputies. One is my husband because because I need the help, and I got 2 others. One of them is my chief deputy, who I lost as a chief deputy because she is now a foreigner from Monroe County making more than what I make to work 4 days a month. Plus she has benefits. So she makes over $10,000 a year to work 4 days a month. So I lost my chief deputy to Monroe County. And then the other one is, so her and I do most of the cases.
so question, and I know this wasn't how this conversation originally started, but to build on kind of what Polly was asking about, and then to talk about hours versus case amount. So if you were, and I'm just thinking outside the box here, if you were to make it hourly, but pay a rate that should be paid for when they do work,
Right.
what would that dollar amount be? And what, if you figure kind of using past estimates, what would the capacity be and then the total cost for part-time deputy coroners? And I know you don't have that number now, but I'm thinking maybe for budget hearings, that might be, and it may be astronomical and not doable, whatever. But I'm wondering if that'd be something worth taking a look at, just to have that discussion and see what can be done.
And I don't really, at this point in time with our money situation with the county, I don't find it quite feasible to even look at it really. I do need a chief deputy pay, because I can't keep a chief deputy.
And that would be more of a salary thing.
That's been on the wish list for over a decade.
Yeah, forever. But, yeah, it's getting harder and harder to find people to do the job. And nobody wants to do it for what the pay is. So, it sucks all the way around. There's just no other way to say it. And I've looked at it it feels like 100 different ways on how we can do something. I've got some suggestions to bring to you guys at budget hearings. I don't really have it all planned out yet, but I'm still working on it. But
I think, Angie, does this deal with the ARPA money? That's what we're talking about,
What's that?
the ARPA money?
yes, this is yes, what we're supposed to be doing about is the ARPA money.
but Jim, did you not look into that and it was not?
Unfortunately, as far as the rule's crystal clear. The Department of Treasury, it's based on payroll, it's based on hours. So this isn't just an opinion by myself. The State Board of Accounts weighed in on that. Barnes and Thornburg is the director of the fund for Owen County. They were crystal clear upon it. I even checked kind of outside. Everyone, it was completely unanimous. There's a rule that if you work a certain percent over whatever the bonus will pay, it cannot do that. So if it was awarded if the council decided to award the ARP money, whenever it is, 2 years from now, 3 years, whatever the State Board of Accounts, this would have to be paid back. It's outside the lines of the rule. Doesn't mean that it wasn't reserved, it just means it really is crystal clear as far as Department of Treasury. auditor's office has looked into it, everyone has tried. There's no leeway here as far as granting it out of the ARP money.
But what it comes down to is, it was announced that all employees were getting a bonus. My people thought they were gonna get a bonus because they worked through all this COVID crap directly. You know, we didn't get to shut down our office at any point in time. We've done calls for COVID, we're still doing calls for COVID. And they need to be compensated. I don't know how it got overlooked, because I guess because the coroner's office in general gets overlooked on everything. But somebody should have said, they don't get paid hourly. So how are we gonna compensate the coroner's office, because they do not follow the qualification that everybody else is for that ARPA money?
So
They still deserve to be compensated.
just to nail this down, you know, the council, Angie, took, so the rates and the jobs and all that for this was not established by the council, all right? The grand total came to the council for appropriation for this. And so with the vetting of the attorney and going through, I mean, as far as us, or if you're saying that we overlooked it or whatever, we looked at a total amount of money.
Right,
Okay.
and I'm not saying it's good, but I'm just saying somehow it got overlooked until everybody got checks, but we didn't. So why didn't we get checks? If nobody knew it was an issue, why didn't my people get checks? So somebody knew it was an issue, but didn't bother to say anything. And then my people come to me when all the other county employees got their bonus money and said, hey, where's our checks? I don't know, I'll have to go find out why you guys didn't get them. I go in to the auditor's office, find out that they didn't qualify because they're not paid hourly. So why weren't they told it, before the checks were even distributed? Because somebody knew, because we didn't get checks.
Sheila, there was an email sent out that who all were going to get
There
it.
were emails, there were public meetings, the discussions were there, it was in the commissioners' meeting, and Angie was even in a couple of the meetings in here that these were being discussed. The limits were set, we had to follow what the rule did. The list that went out were to the departments with the people who qualified that were on there, because not all departments, all employees qualified. Chris had some that weren't on there, so those lists each time, as they were updated, were taken to the commissioners and determined that they met the 800 hours minimum and that process. And unfortunately, because they're not paid hourly, you can't total up their hours. Angie prepared lists brought to you guys 2 or 3 meetings ago with the number of hours that her people actually work or put in there. And that was when you guys said that you were gonna take a look at it, you tabled it, and it's back tonight.
It sounds like there is nothing that we can do. I hate that entry, and I understand where you're coming from. Lack of communication, I don't know.
Well, I don't care, and my people I think they brushed it off, that they're not gonna get it, they know they're not gonna get the money. But what I wanna argue is, I don't want it ever happen again. Because if it does, you'll have a coroner's office that's empty with no employees. They're not gonna stand to be overlooked again. If there's another bonus, I don't care if it has to come out of a completely different fund, you're gonna make it comparable to what everybody else gets. They need to get it too.
Like I said, I totally understand where you're coming from, and we will, if there is something like that comes up, and we will make sure and how we can combat that, but at this time, I feel like it is pretty much our hands are tied, so do we wanna make I mean, is there any action or what?
Yeah, and I would echo what Nick was saying is that, well, the two things, the federal rules are against us. And then
Yeah.
second, maybe the communication really wasn't where it should have been. And it's unfortunate that all had unfolded in that way. But I think our hands are kind of tied. That's the bad
And
part.
I got that from day one.
Yeah.
But my employees didn't understand it.
Yeah.
They still don't understand it, why they got left out. And that part I do understand. So, I don't wanna see it happen again.
And hopefully if something like that, comes up again, that we combat that before the fact instead of after. And then
Right.
maybe we can make it where it is more fair across the board. So,
And I know
just-
there's other counties that ran into the same issue. With the same thing,
right.
for the corner.
And it's unfortunate, because I do understand, and you guys did work all the way through COVID and still are. And I hate that.
And if I could just make a final point, you guys gotta remember, that's a biohazard job, okay? That's a biohazard job.
Any more discussion?
Yeah, I have to excuse myself, I have to leave.
Yes, I'm sorry, Chuck, once again.
You know what?
Missed that.
These things never go short. Whoever promised me it was gonna go short.
I know.
Thank you for having me back. Can I just say one thing before I go? I just wanna note, the passing of Sheriff Harley Melton. This was one of the first guys I met when I came to this county, and that man was good to this county. Regardless of what party you're from or anything else, Greg, your dad was a hero in my book, and I will miss him. And God bless you and your family.
Yes.
Can I ask that before you leave, can I ask that you guys, someone just make a motion that the coroner's office just officially, that they are not gonna receive it, that way
Okay,
my employees can kind of give it up.
Well, since I'm in charge of, or your liaison, I make a motion that we advise the coroner's office that due to our hands being federally tied with the ARPA funds, we do not mean them any harm, but they will not be receiving a bonus. We issue an apology to them, and based on what your request was, any future thing that occurs, we will communicate at a higher level.
motion's on the floor, is there a second? Seconded by Nick. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you, please thank your people, please thank you. Having been one of those,
An email.
Yeah, you had a more than graphic representation of their jobs tonight.
what's that?
You had a more than graphic representation
Oh,
of
you
their.
ain't, I can go worse, trust me, right? Kevin?
Sure you
Yeah,
can.
we've been on.
I'll invite you on out of the office right now, I've got one that's been there, probably about,
Good to see you, Jen.
Yeah,
Thank
good to
you.
see you.
Sorry, I gotta pull my pants up.
Okay.
Y'all might scream. I don't want
Okay,
that on YouTube either.
all right, moving on.
God bless you guys.
God bless you.
Greg, I'm sorry I can't be here for you. But I'm supporting whatever he brings up, you understand, folks?
He might bring up a lot then.
All right, I am officially opening the public hearing for the additional appropriations. Have those in your packet.
Madam Chair, these were appropriations that we addressed
Yes,
last meeting,
yes.
to
This is the public hearing to officially,
address all these.
yes.
Okay, do we want to take them separately or one line at a time?
What do we want to
Because these
do?
have all been advertised, have they not?
Right. Yes,
Okay, so the EMS was added. You guys at the last meeting allowed Anton to work with Chris and to come up with proposals. The estimated amount was 70,000. We went ahead and advertised it at 80 based on discussion tonight. So the first two at the 200,000 and the 5,000 definitely were. I think you ought to look at this one, the EMS one separately.
Okay, I make a motion then we allow the first two, the Riverboat Fund 1191, and then the Riverboat Fund, let's see, liability insurance and fuel.
Motion made, is
I
there,
second it.
seconded by Burl.
And on that $5,000 one, I know on the original request, it didn't really have an explanation, again, just for the record, what that 5,000 was for.
That was the legal fees that were performed for the liability
Yeah,
insurance.
the deductible required on the insurance.
Oh, the deductible, got it, thank you.
Any other discussion?
Sorry.
All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, on to Chris's.
And Tom, was there something about the EMS that we needed to discuss?
Absolutely. At the last meeting, the council had voted to proceed in changing the rates of pay for the positions of paramedic, paramedic supervisor, assistant director, and EMTs. And also to flatten or equal part-time positions to the same rates of pay, or the full-time equivalent positions. And the task was to put together for you a report, which is in your packet, that outlines the cost to do that for the full year. And then we dialed that back to figure an estimated pro rata cost for the balance of 22. Is that correct, Chris? Yes, sir. And essentially what we're gonna do is under, and it's in the report, but under the old structure, because we haven't done anything, you know, with our compensation system yet. Under our current system, the pay is outlined so that it matches up and conforms with that, but the net result is gonna match up with what Chris's proposal was, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I want to add that Chris has the balance to sustain this for a long time. That is not a problem.
Yeah,
Then, are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
I make a motion that we accept, we've already advertised for it,
Mhm.
and we talked about, allow this to happen.
Motion made, is there a second?
I second.
Second by Burl. All those, any more discussion?
and just for the record, again, he knows where I stand on this. I am in favor of the comprehensive plan. I don't disagree with them earning this or meeting it, but I'm gonna vote no for the record.
All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay,
What we'll do is for the next meeting, we'll have compensation summaries for every employee that's in his inventory. So you're gonna have a stack, Polly, about that thick for signature. And it'll reflect, we'll probably do those earlier because for payroll, whenever the first full cycle comes in, then those adjustments will kick in and then they can be paid for those new amounts at that point. So we'll try to get
Is this
them.
effective pay as of today? Well, I have to enter them into DLG up, so we have to wait till their final approval, but
Who seconded that motion?
okay, that's the end. I'm officially closing the public hearing. All right, new business. My path. Trail update.
Thank you.
I think we owe you an apology.
I was advised to make this clear. It has nothing to do with the wage.
Yeah. Good thing.
Just a minute. So again, I'm Kyle Hansen, the project manager for the MyPath Trail System. I'm here to bring you the freshest news on MyPath, except that's not the freshest news. It's a couple months old. I hope that you've already heard it. I hope you consider it good news, actually, that we received a next level sales grant from the state. So there will be $640,000 coming to help us pave the path from the Soil and Water Conservation Office across the field next to the reforestation project that's going on And then when we get to Elson Creek, we will cross the refurbished and relocated Hancock School Road Bridge, and then go around the My Path Meadow, right, where the new pollinator garden is, and then on to River Road, and then continue to up to the boat launch, and there'll be pavement to pick up there again, and that'll be the project. It'll be this part of the project. Now, mind you, from there, we can see Cormorant Creek State Park. You can see it, it's like, darn it, but that'll have to be the future that we move forward to. So we're really excited about this. We've already had our first meeting with the design group that's gonna be putting this plan together. They have stages that they're going through. Our next big step is a topographical survey that will be starting probably in another week or two. And from that, you can really then get into the environmental permitting, which takes a long time too. So between the survey and the environmental permitting, then you're able to do the design drawings, and then you get bid documents together, hopefully by the end of this year, and then it'll be bid out in February. Construction might start and have a little groundbreaking next late spring, early summer, and it'll take a while. So this time next year, you might be riding your bike, pushing a stroller, perhaps a wheelchair, along the new My Path Trail system. And I really appreciate the cooperation that we've had with the county through this whole process. Councilman Neff sits on our advisory board. Of course, this amount of money, we needed a pretty big matching part as well. And that we were able to include the property that we're using that belongs to Owen County Soil and Water Conservation. We're able to include the bridge as part of the match. We're able to include labor, so if anyone wants to come out tomorrow, we're spreading traffic. Plastic, I promise it'll be hot and uncomfortable. You're welcome to join us at 5:30. But other things may come up, in the future that if you're interested, you certainly can pitch in. But that's where we're going. I think this is a big step for Owen County. I think it'll be a great project, and really looking forward to it being done. You'll all be invited to groundbreaking and then the ribbon. So this will be fun. And again, I will try to keep you up to tabs on good news as it comes along. We're really excited about this. Have any questions about it?
And just a comment, that just for those tuning in and that are not familiar with MyPath, generally it is a collaboration of multiple organizations like the YMCA and Cormorant Creek State Park, the Owen County Community Foundation, Soil and Water Conservation District, and Owen County government, the town of Spencer, have been partners in it. And as he mentioned, there's really not been any direct county resources put in. There's no money that's been given to them or any budget or anything. I just want to clarify that. But it has been quite successful through the use of grants and other partnerships to make it happen. And that's what I think makes it a lot more special, really, that people have been able to pull off what they've done so far with those kind of resources. So
it is good. The cooperation is something too, and that is something I do want to keep in mind as well. That River Road, and kind of as I said in the commissioners meeting, people in Owen County are nice and patient, peaceful folks, but your visitors can be crazy drivers sometimes. So River Road is not always. You may not on a bicycle feel as safe as perhaps you should. So we've been looking at, is there a way we can fit a little shoulder in there between the big ball and the big drop off? And perhaps there is, but we're looking at some ideas. We'll hopefully cooperate with the highway department without making them pay anything. We're not boosting their budget at all. We're looking at some alternatives, things we can do there. So it's just, again, there might be future cooperation where we'll say, if we pay them, can they pay something? It's really something like that in the future. But again, we're not going to impact their budget. We're not going to. But anyway, thanks. This is an exciting thing. I will try to come back to you more frequently when good news is starting, maybe when the survey is done or something like that, just to let you know.
Please pass on to all your stakeholders how much we appreciate it.
Thank you. Will do.
What a positive thing for Owen County. So
yeah, it'll be. It's going to be really a big deal. And this is, I think, once you see a paved trail, things are going to change for the better.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next is care of patients. Sheila, do you want to
In your packet, provided the paperwork, we're $37,205 in the red, and it's only halfway through the year. There's no way of knowing how many more might be sent. It varies, and I'm not sure what the past years were. I just know that this is the current negative amount and needs to be addressed. Either get it out of the red now, we really don't wanna keep it running in the red if we don't have to, but we might have to come back later for additional appropriations. And these are for juveniles that are sent outside of the county to other facilities, and it's law that
Donna McElroy had mentioned that placement for juveniles has been very difficult because of limited bed space for those individuals, and it's also not cheap. It's not at the rate of 55 or even 35 a day, it's hundreds of dollars. So care of patients is an obligation of the county to pay, and there's not a lot of choice with this, unfortunately. But I make a motion that we appropriate or advertise for appropriation out of the Riverboat Fund, an amount that would, what are we in the hole in at the moment?
37,205.
37,000 behind now, that's in the red. Would 60, you think, be a good number?
I'm sorry, I don't think you have 60,000.
No, we don't have that in the riverboat.
257,000 in your riverboat now, but one of your additional appropriations that you just approved takes 200,000 and the other 5,000 out of that, so you
Okay,
have, you don't
not for that
have enough.
amount. Okay. So where do we wanna take it from?
What are our options?
No.
We don't have a lot of options. It could be the general fund. It could be, you could use edit funds.
If you wanna table it to review a best place, given that we're getting ready to go into budget hearings and looking at your caps and stuff, if you wanted to table it 1 month,
Are we okay to stay in the red though for,
we're already in the red.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's one of them that it's there, you can't help.
well, we will get a new riverboat revenue amount in August, so that may wind up kind of presenting an opportunity anyway, but I'll go ahead and modify the direction I was heading by making a motion that we postpone consideration of the care of patients portion to our next meeting.
Motion made by Anton, seconded by Nick. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, Highway Department, additional appropriations and transfer requests.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How do you wish to proceed? You have all the stuff in front of you, so you read it, what Sheila read.
They've got all your additional appropriations on your, so whether you wanna do salary increase or appropriations first.
Okay, we start with the additional appropriations, the motor vehicle restricted 1173 from the cash balance to pay for construction and reconstruction throughout the rest of the year. We would ask for $50,000. And that's in motor vehicle fund 1173-23500. The same amount in 1173-23700. Those are the first two additional appropriations in regard to 1173. In regard to 1169, we asked for an additional appropriation of $90,000 to continue maintenance projects throughout the year. We've stayed within the budget this time of $385,229.86 with the rising costs. We request the additional appropriation out of our cash balance. 1176, 24,200, $10,000. 1176, 22,300, $15,000. Those would be uniforms and tires. And then, ask for an additional appropriation of $2,152.36 to 1176, 45800. And I want to explain. In the state of Indiana, we don't pay property tax on anything that we have, but in 2018, the commissioners leased a Motrin, and we have argued the point that we do not pay property tax, but it's leased out of a corporation of Iowa, and we find that we are responsible to pay that property tax, so we owe them, I have no appropriation for that, $2,152.36.
Who would have thought? Okay.
And 1176, 30100, other services, out of the cash balance of $20,000. And then in 1135, we ask, it's the Cume Bridge Fund, again, these have healthy cash balances. We ask for $60,000 to be placed in culverts, 1135, 23,600, because the other funds cannot support this. Those are the additional appropriations we ask for out of our cash balances.
So these adjustments would, in your estimation, take care of you through the end of the year? That's your hope?
That is correct, and we do believe it'll take us through the end of the year. If the council recalls, we turned in a true budget and we cut
$200 and some thousand?
$245,000, which would require us to come back before the council if we needed added appropriation, so that's what I'm here to do today.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of choice on these. We have to fulfill our obligations. I'm gonna make a motion that we proceed in advertising these additional appropriations as presented by the Highway Department and read by Greg.
I second that.
Motion made by Anton, seconded by Nick. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you, Councilman. I would note, other than the property tax, situation, we are within budget. We have not came before the council before anything else.
And the fuel we already took care of through.
Fuel is taken care of. So far, we're still, in our appropriation line.
We're going to need that now.
Okay. Do we want to talk about the wages?
Yes.
Okay, council, I'm here tonight in regard to wages, and the only reason, that I'm here to speak about this tonight was, my two office staff were part of the, I'll just call it the list that, the commissioners intended to have a raise. I was told that, I would need, if I wanted them to have this raise, I would need to have to come up with funds in my own budget to do so, because we stand alone. So that, is what we did. The council will have to decide this evening whether they want, midpoint or low point, but it was our belief when we went into, preparing this, and you have that in front of you, that, we would be asking for midpoint. Two would be my office administrator and my secretary. They have been just like the courthouse, many years without raises. And that is, again, I've presented that to you, you've had it since last Wednesday. If you were to go midpoint, I would transfer funds from my seasonal part-time in the amount of $4,980.72. If it is the low point, and I don't have the matrix here tonight for workers' compensation. I did have it low point when we did the first figures, but somewhere, I would say around $2,000, because without the workman's compensation, numbers we come with is $1,468.81. For 2023, as the sheriff has had to do, we've had to look within to see how to trim and adjust. And we believe the best way to do that is in seasonal part-time. We haven't had any seasonal part-time in the last 2 years because we can't get anyone to work, but at budget time, I'll present to you for a raise with seasonal part-time. But to cut the hours down to 8 weeks while school is out, because we have our best luck hiring people that work for the school system while they're off for the summer. And we can fund this from here on out by doing it this way.
So you're saying that their pay is less than the low point right
It is.
now. In dollars, what are we looking, I mean, you said about $2,000 to bring them up to the low point?
Yes,
This is out of your budget,
it is.
and there's adequate funds.
I have adequate funds, yes, and I'll be able to fund this continuously.
So just to go over numbers, it looks like if you do the difference to the low, if you're looking at including workers' comp, FICA and all that is correct. That's about $2,000 for both of these positions. The pay alone is about 1,500 of that. The other 500 would be the incidentals that go with it. And then the difference to the midpoint would be for the year, each one would be about 3,500 each, plus the FICA and all that stuff. So the grand total for the year, a clean year, is 11,773. Is that about the amount that you came up with when you did the math? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's for a whole.
That's for a whole year.
That's for the whole year.
For 2 people.
For 2 people.
Yeah, and then he's got a number of transfers which would figure on 11 pays left in this current budget year.
That is correct. We have a transfer in 1176, 11300, let's see, for the amount of $4,184.18. That would be for pay at midpoint. Transfer for FICA, 1176, 12100, in the amount of $320.09. For PERF, 1176, 2300, $468.63. And then for workers' comp, 1176, 39, 200, $7.82.
So these are areas where you want to transfer.
These are the areas I would transfer from to make this happen, yes.
And if I may, some of these transfers may not have to take place because we have not kept a full staff throughout the year that's budgeted for.
Right now, we're down 3 truck drivers on the first, or last day of this month. I'm going to lose another full-time truck driver, so I'll be down to 4 truck drivers. We've been, in general, all year long, at least two down. And we're down to laborer, and we've been down to laborer, most all year.
Anton, you said that money would bring him to the midpoint?
Yeah, these figures is what he's using to essentially take these two support positions to their midpoint targets.
I make a motion with granted.
Motion made by Nick. Second,
Second.
seconded by Earl. Any more discussion?
But I do have discussion, of course. You know how I'll vote on this, nothing personal, but I do want to ask a couple quick questions. The first is, generally, that would put these positions ahead of operators, and other people within the department. Is that okay? I'm sure you've thought of that, but I'm
I
just.
have thought of that.
Okay.
And one of the things, I'm just gonna revert back, to something my father always taught me, is surround yourself with the best people you can to get the job done. My administrative assistant is equal to, and sorry, Chad, but in general, more important than my assistant superintendent. So yes, I do believe that, is
And they
the fact
are
that
good.
it needs to happen.
They are good, for sure.
They are, and I think I'm gonna have to speak for the entire, courthouse, because I never thought we were gonna present at the same time, but these people work hard, and, I just think you have to stand up for what's right. And maybe the operator doesn't agree, but the operators did get over $1 hour raise, in 20, when these folks didn't. But I do think it's the proper thing to do, because what we're talking about right now is our bucks, our money, and that's what's closer than anything.
I just wanted to make sure, I'm sure you thought through that, but.
I did.
And who knows, there may be good and bad conversations after that, but you'll, I'm sure, deal with that.
That was my question.
Yeah, sorry to take your question, but, and again, in fairness to that dollar or whatever that was then, this of course is a lot more than $1, adjustment.
Yes.
And so there's that element to it, but I just wanted to make sure
Yes.
I quizzed you on that, so, thank you.
And I do at budget time have a plan to bring before you that may cut a few employees, but bring some raises, because we've been without for such a long time. But I'm here tonight because I believe that the council wanted us to be here tonight with this information. That's the reason I'm here. But I do have a plan at budget time for those individuals from within my own budget.
And the financial situation, 2 months ago, we had a discussion. You said you had no money, you didn't have any way of doing this kind of thing, but you've now had a chance to do it essentially, and that's where you're now in this position to.
It is. I think earlier on, we were all faced with the same thing that the council is. I'm sitting and looking at a budget very early on, and I couldn't do it at that time because I just didn't see the money there. But now, we're this far into the year and we've had a chance to look at the numbers. I do believe we're there. I've worked with Jim with this, I've worked with the commissioners with this, and that's where we're at.
I gotta have one question. If either one of these individuals would leave highway department, you wouldn't start a new staff member?
No.
So motion's on the floor by Nick, seconded by Earl. More discussion?
So the other technical part to this is that if you are proposing to utilize seasonal, then I would assume that the motion takes into account vacating part of the capacity then.
It does.
Does it wouldn't be all of it though. So do you have any kind of a target, what that needs to be reduced to? Or can we make sure we have that number for formalizing the budget change that needs to happen with those positions?
I can, yes.
Is that a part of your motion, Nick?
I think it would be feasible.
Just to make sure we've.
I think you need, because his budget is so tight, and if an emergency or something comes up, not to get rid of that extra funds. It was there, and he might need it over the next 5 or 6 months. Obviously, don't use it if you don't need to,
Right.
but to vacate,
Yeah, I don't wanna
All of those
vacate all of it, but I
positions,
don't intend to use it either.
Right.
So you're saying, Sheila, it'd be better to leave
Motion as is?
the dollar amount in
I
the
would
budget?
the dollar amounts that was put in, and this is just suggestion, in that line item, he's going to take this 11,773 or however it works out, the total dollar amount to pay them.
And that'd be a
And-
transfer.
And those are these transfers that he's submitted tonight, but leave that in case he needs it in an emergency, cause his budgets are so tight anyway, I wouldn't. And you don't wanna reduce his budget, if you take that out of there and you reduce it and I turn that into the state, they're gonna look at that
Right.
when,
Yeah, that's a good technical suggestion. But it will be transferred from the line item to full-time or regular wages to cover the difference for the 11 pays,
yes.
if that makes sense.
Okay, are we ready for a vote? Yes.
I'm absolutely ready.
All those in favor?
I'm
All those opposed?
one
So-
abstain.
3, 4, and 1 abstain and 1 against.
And we'll get the numbers to you and formalize that for those updates.
Thank you, council.
Take a break, I think.
Yeah, we want to take.
We don't have, I don't know if we really have a lot left, but you wanna go ahead and take a break?
I'm fine.
9:30,
Oh, no, can we take a break?
there you go.
Well, I mean,
5 minutes.
I'm fine with no break, but if we,
I'm good.
I'm good.
The last 4 things, but
They're not really that much.
I'm gonna
Let's-
waive mine.
Let's
I'm
I'm
proceed.
gonna waive mine until.
Let's knock it out.
10 minutes.
Let's knock it out, right? We can do this.
Okay, so coroner additional appropriation request. Let's get this. You got that?
How much was it? 6,000?
Welcome back
6,000.
to the hot seat, right?
Yeah, it's a hot seat. I didn't ask for the first time.
So this was autopsies is our problem,
No,
right?
this is.
No, this is
This
part-time,
is the part-time,
And I'll
the
start,
caseload.
right.
I'll start out with, it's also a little bit to do with what was budgeted
Yeah, I've already got it.
for me for the year, and then what I actually got. So, you guys had increased my part-time to $9,738, for this year. However, at the first of the year, 2,656 of that was taken back away from me, I guess due to it was not turned in on time, according to.
Angie didn't submit the budget last year, then one of the meetings she came in and asked to increase it to that amount, but it had not been advertised for the public hearing that you guys had held on the budgets, so DLGF cut that amount.
So I actually only started with $7,082 in my part-time.
So in this year, you've got your budget in.
It'll be advertised for a higher amount, yeah.
So, that mistake doesn't get made again, right?
Yes, I'm hoping. So, so what I was looking at, so we had that $2,000. I was down, so when they called in the middle of last month or emailed me and said, hey, you're in the red and you're part-time, I was like, what, how's that? And then I found out that 2,000 was taken back out. So I wouldn't actually be in the red right now had that money been in there, but it's not. So, I am currently at 42 cases. This time last year I was at 21 cases. So I've doubled my caseload. I'm projecting 70 to 80 cases this year.
So you think this trend's going to continue then?
Yeah, it just continues to go up each year. So, I'm hoping it won't get that high, but I asked for the 6,000 because that would kind of give me, it would make, so if I added that 6,000 to what I was actually received from my budget, it would cover 74 cases. So it's kind of right in the middle of where I think we're probably gonna land for this year.
Well, it's like autopsies, it's variable depending on the number of deaths.
Yes, and we are definitely up on autopsies.
There's no way
So
around
I
it.
will,
So does this amount, Jim, work for Riverboat? Because it's only 6, so do we have something
You
there?
have roughly, Anton, a round number of $50,000.
Okay. Unless there's any objection, I'm gonna make a motion, we proceed with advertising the $6,000 appropriation from Riverboat for the coroner's deputy part-time caseload numbers.
Right.
So,
and then just so you kind of have it autopsy wise too, I'm not here to ask for autopsy money tonight, but it's probably coming. I was at 7 last year at this time, I'm at 14, so I've doubled on that number as well. So not much I can do about it. I mean, I'm trying not to, but.
And even with that extra 20,000 that we did for
Yeah.
autopsies.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping that will cover it.
Okay, good.
and did you start, I know there's a motion that's not been seconded,
Right.
but real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to that, did you also start in the hole on autopsies as well? Was there
I
a
did.
carryover or something
Yeah,
from the
and I-
previous year?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank
You
you,
guys, yeah, already give the 20,000, so I'm hoping that will.
appreciate it.
Motion's been made by Anton, seconded by Nick to grant this this 6,000 additional appropriation request. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
I'm going to abstain, but not just because I was in the bathroom.
You went after.
All right.
For
the record.
For the record, all right, too much of this.
Okay,
Thank you.
I know the probation one, if you want me to go ahead and describe that real quick. So the full-time position, there's 2 full-time positions in probation and corrections. One of them has been unfilled for a while. She's not found a suitable candidate for that. She did send an email out to everybody about 5 o'clock this afternoon explaining that. And so the part-time individual she has 3 part-time people that's a part of a pool that has been paid out of one of the non-levied funds, one of the corrections funds. That's been $20,000 accounted or put towards that. She would like to take part of the unused amount from the full-time position and move it to part-time to help supplement their increased hours as a result of the unfilled full-time position. So there's no change in any rates of pay, there's no additional staff, there's no new money that's being spent. It's just utilizing that transfer to make up for the additional capacity needed, and it's $10,000 for that transfer.
I make that motion that we can allow the transfer of $10,000
motion made.
in probation.
Second. Motion made by Nick, seconded by Amy. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay,
She's sorry she couldn't be here tonight, so.
and you're withdrawing your request, Sheila?
I think based on that you guys are trying to look at that 125,000 or cap of whatever, that, you know, I could possibly come back with it as far as maybe raises for my people, because it is out of 2 other funds, but given the other stuff, we'll figure out how to get it done. Until you guys read it, and just,
Appreciate it.
Sheila, can I ask this question? Did you not give up a position when we was looking at Paycor?
Paycor, February of 2021, we were looking at it and moving forward, it ended up it not being compatible with our current Lao financial system. However, I had also offered that money to pay for that company's services, and long story short, I didn't get that amount back. I was given some part-time funds, and since then I had used those to combine a position with the audit, or the treasurer's office.
So, you're, okay, but you don't want to address it tonight?
I think given that you tabled and we're looking at a cap, that it's more important to make sure that this will fit within that cap.
We appreciate that, Sheila. I know you've given up a lot and really not got a lot in return.
So I think the WTH acronym there in this next item is very interesting. I know it's the name of the company, but it's like at this point, literally, right?
Suzanne is gonna explain.
Suzanne, you've thought the same thing.
Yeah.
So.
I've used it a few times. Okay, so, what it is there was a claim that came in. It is to the commissioners, but it's from WTH for $5,319. I did not budget for this because I knew nothing about this. I pay a $9,600 bill that pays for the website, the licenses, and all of that out of my budget. But this was not estimated. So together they make $14,919 together for WTH. But when asked what it was, the WTH said, Bev from WTH said that it was the PS, which is job title, job type, is public safety. I don't know what the difference is in what I pay. This is for customer service and stuff like that.
So is this a recurring?
This is a recurring bill.
So-
We get two different bills from them. This one, and then we get a $9,600 one, which pays for the website, all of the licenses, and we've got about 60-some licenses that we pay for. That includes fire departments and volunteer fire departments that have them. The school had a license, so we're paying for a lot of licenses that are outside of the actual courthouse, and so.
I would like to make a motion that we allow the attorney, before we pay this, to look into this and let's find out. We know over the years, we've actually been billed by companies and never got a service. I'd just like to know if this is legit, and if that isn't that hard, and we'll pass it next bill, or next meeting, if it's a legitimate bill.
I second that.
And Kathleen has stated that this is not something that they utilize because they're part of the same map system that Suzanne uses.
That's weird.
And she doesn't feel that it's hers either. And I agree that we need to look into it. I think we need to invite WTH to a commissioners meeting and say, what do we have, what are we doing? Greg had portions of the map and that kind of stuff that wasn't, and this has been all over the place, and it's been part in the building and part in the auditor's office, and if they're utilizing it down there, but they're using the same systems that she's entering, then what is this for? So.
Well, and the other thing is that my revenue is building department. I think I've made maybe $300 on the mapping part of it. The mapping doesn't bring in the money. That's basically just an expense that the county has to service the public. So when, I have adjusted my budget, but I'm not sure that my budget should absorb this entirety, the entire $14,000, because it is a blanketed group of people that use it, not just me. So there's lots of departments outside of the courthouse, outside of the county's blanket, they use it, so.
Should we bill the town and school and stuff that uses that?
Well, I tell you what, I just don't got it, let me take a look.
Yeah, check it all out.
Motion's
Or call for a
made by,
vote.
yeah. Motion on the floor, seconded. All those in favor? Table, motion carried.
Thank you, Suzanne.
All right,
Appreciate your service.
mileage rate ordinance.
16, and this is a very short one. Okay, this is with the new mileage rate. This is ordinance number 2022-016, an ordinance by Owen County Council establishing a reimbursable mileage rate for the county travel. Whereas it is determined that it shall be necessary to reimburse certain Owen County officials and employees for travel on county business as prescribed by law by the state of Indiana. Now therefore be it ordained by the Owen County Council the following: Section 1, mileage rate. The Owen County Council hereby adopts a mileage reimbursement rate of 41 cents per mile. Procedure: any person seeking reimbursement under this ordinance will file an itemized claim with the county auditor each month under Indiana Code 36262. Section 2, a person who has a claim against the county shall file an invoice with the bill of the county auditor. The auditor will present the bill or invoice to the county executive, who shall examine the merits of the claim. The executive may allow any part of the claim it finds to be valid. Section 3, repeal. This ordinance supersedes all other ordinances, parts of ordinances which are in conflict with its provisions. All prior ordinances and resolutions in conflict, inconsistent herewith, are hereby expressly repealed, passed and adopted by the Owen County Council in a regular meeting held on today's date and month. The Owen County Council of Andy Wood, Brooke, Anton Neff, Dick Robinson, Paul Chester, Chuck Cass, Amy Casefair. If so passed, will be attested by Sheila Reeves, auditor.
And that's 49 cents a month?
41.
41, okay.
41, that's the new state.
Yeah, because I've,
49, she wrote the wrong one. That's 49. It's
I think it was 40.
Yeah, it's
Can we accept the ordinance?
I'll second that.
made by Nick, seconded by Anton. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Now, what is that mileage number?
49 cents.
49, it's 49. It's 49.
Turn get your Volkswagen.
I'm gonna make a motion to allow the president to sign the, salary ordinance and confirmation summaries.
I second it.
Motion made by Andy, seconded by Nick. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, elected official and department comments. Chris, do you wanna? I'm sorry to.
Thank you, sir.
Chris.
You okay?
So I think I mentioned at the last meeting, there's a couple meetings. I can't remember exactly where I mentioned it. We all know that there was a little bit more tax revenue that came to the EMS than what we should. We knew that was coming. And rather than just sit on those funds, I talked to a couple of people. I was asked to bring this tonight. And if you look at page number 2 from People's State Bank, they figured this on July 8th. If we would pay off the EMS building, we would save the taxpayers $217,036. The payoff as of that date, of July 8th, is $639,136.41. The interest rate is 3.875. So I put some pros and cons together. That probably is not an all-inclusive list, pros and cons, but just in my mind, that's what I came up with. You know,
Not a lot of cons on this one, which is good,
I
but.
don't see it, but there could be some opposition to it. I don't know, but so anyway, just for consideration, some numbers that I was asked to put together for you guys, just to roll around in your mind a little bit. And then also, I want to get some guidance from you all. We know that we ordered an ambulance, or getting ready to order at this next meeting, I hope. That ambulance bid came in at $199,000. I've got $150,000 in this year's budget. We know that the ambulance is gonna take a year and a half to 2 years to get. So, I'm trying to find out if there's any advantage to prepaying the ambulance. I don't know if we can even prepay. I don't know if we can pay for something that we haven't received yet. But I'm trying to figure that out. But if not, the Tahoe that, our second out Tahoe already has 190,000 miles on it. And it's been giving us a few problems, not terrible, but it's been in the shop $3,000 worth already this year. So, we could replace some cots. I'm just thinking of how we could use that money to get our capital projects up to where they need to be. Last time I had the power cots serviced, the service rep, he said, I really don't want to put this one back in service. I said, well, it's not really an option because I don't have the money to buy another one. So he replaced some bushings in it and got it tightened up some. But it's really getting, one of our cots is really getting worn. So, you know, replace our manual cots with power cots. Buy a couple more power load systems. Right now, if we have an ambulance go in the shop for repairs, we're back to lifting up manually people, you know, lifting up the cot and the person to get them in the ambulance. So those are just some ideas that we could use those funds for, since we're not going to get an ambulance this year. So just trying to figure a way to maximize those funds to bring us up to speed. So just for consideration, discussion, anybody wants to call me and ask about any of them, feel free to. But just some information for you guys to mull over and decide if there's any direction you want to go with it.
Chris, if we allow this $217,000 to be paid,
No,
it's savings.
yeah, it's saving, yeah, it's the savings of 217,000.
About six.
Well, if it's $639,000, how's that affecting your funds?
I've got a pretty healthy cash balance right now. That would bring us, like I said, 1.7, Jim?
As of the 7th, you've got $1.6 million.
So you still have a comfortable $1 million. You've been with us for many years. Do you see that problem?
Do I see that a problem?
Do you see paying that? I don't think you would suggest it if you didn't feel comfortable.
No, we worked probably the last half of last year on 500,000.
Okay.
So that, I mean.
This could be a plus.
Yeah, remember, Nick, because of the way the settlement and the state rates worked, the EMS fund had an erroneous extra amount of money that they got versus the general fund. We can't just move it to the general fund. So this would be a really good spot to shore up some finances, save a ton of money in the long run for the taxpayer.
That's $217,000.
I mean, it's a no-brainer to me, but, you know, it's a golden opportunity.
I'm on
Really.
the same page there.
Do we want to address it tonight?
I'm willing to.
Well,
No.
please, I'm just saying, there would be an alternative that I don't know that it's in a lot you guys want to discuss, but what I'm saying, there's also other options that I don't know that the council will be totally aware of. So, what I guess I'm gonna say this in shorthand, not trying to debate, there's an interest rate that Chris mentioned that might be a savings of 260, 270, something that range. However, you may be getting ready in the next year or 18 months to take on a $25 million loan that may not be at that interest rate. I would just ask you to keep open the option that maybe before this money is spent, because once spent, it's gone, is using this money in a different way as a down payment on the jail, would that actually maybe save you hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the 200,000 here? I don't know, but I'm just saying, rather, if you are thinking about a vote, I felt I had a duty to say maybe you wanna look at a couple of other options before we make a final determination here.
But the only way that would be is if his budget was in the general fund, is that
Absolutely,
correct?
and again, playing my own broken record, one of the financial recommendations is just to check EMS, make it part of the appropriation, put all of this in, that would give you a general fund amount of roughly $3 million. Now, what would have to be done is a closing out at 11/51, it's not mandated by the state, that may not be all what the council wants to do, I'm just saying it's a legal option. Then you would have $3 million in the general fund, and the EMS would become an appropriated budget, it would have a location, same as the treasurer and the auditor. I'm not saying you wanna do that, I'm just saying, if you want to consider all the different options, perhaps at a different time, that there would be different options for the council to consider.
Well, I just wanna, for the record, again, I'm still against putting it in the general fund, and that's, just because of what we're facing here. I mean, he's done an excellent job in managing his department and bringing his department up. And when Chris took over, it was struggling, and he's done a wonderful job with building that up. And I don't think that, I'm not in favor of putting it in the general fund, but I think I've already voiced.
I totally agree with that. Not to short circuit open discussion here, but the benefit of having a separate fund like that, and the same with highway and others, is the flexibility of operations. That's not putting all your eggs in one basket, which would be the general. And I do, the loan part is very valid, and that's, the con on there is exactly that point, and that's something Chris and I had talked about earlier, is the trade of what is essentially a very low interest rate that we're locked in on. So it's, I don't wanna say good debt, but there's the term good debt, that when you have lower interest obligations, those are the last ones you pay off. But we don't really have any other obligations at any rate like that, but we would if we had a jail, because you're not gonna get 3.8% for a jail project. But at the same time, if you can't use this money anyway towards a jail project, then that's really a non-issue.
Right.
So.
It wasn't brought, for a vote or anything, I was just asked to put numbers together to bring just for discussion and maybe turn some wheels and so, yeah, it wasn't brought for a vote or anything tonight, so.
Okay, thank you.
And on the trucks, by the way, the other part, if the budget is already set and the commissioners and Chris feel that if they can't buy an ambulance anyway and they have unused money for equipment, then that would be the priority they want to do. That's up to them, right? There's really nothing extra the council would need to do for that, so. Yeah.
It's just if.
So you're saying no board action needed to be?
No, because it'd be within the limit of what's been budgeted already for an ambulance, but there won't be an ambulance purchase this year, so. Chris, since we're kind of 2 ambulances behind, is the next order, is that going ahead? And since we recently spec'd out the first one that we ordered, how soon will we be speccing and moving forward on the second to kind of get that in the pipeline?
Yeah, I definitely want to wait till we get this one.
Okay.
Hopefully that'll be this next meeting. And then I want to get that out of the way and start.
Because getting the clock started is a big problem, so, okay. Just want to make sure we brought that up. Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing that. I think, I still am totally in favor of paying off that loan, but, we'll discuss it, and then I guess we'll
I think we'll just move on to public comments maybe.
We had Sam one.
I'll just let you know, we'll have our proposals to you on Friday.
Any other elected officials? Public comments?
Comment public here. These are rough meetings to sit through.
Being up here.
Two questions for you. December 2020, there was some very oddball movements of funds, and one was 700,000, I think it went to your building. Has that been paid back?
That was money that was pledged, if I remember right, it was pledged from the EMS to pay the building, or for
Well, the
the
transfer
building.
was out of employee health benefits, totally illegal. And I understand 700,000 of that went to you.
I have no idea about that.
Okay.
Sheila,
Second
do
question.
you wanna,
We live in a big country. You got a 2-year lead time to get an ambulance. I think it would make a great deal of sense to search high and low to see if some department doesn't have a good ambulance that you could pick up now and cut this 2-year wait and get your damn ambulance.
Unfortunately, I've discussed that with a couple sales guys, because, and there's other options I'm looking at also. But unfortunately, everybody's having this 2-year lead time because of the chip issue and because of aluminum prices. There's this big lag time, so everybody's holding on to what they've got.
Well, there may be some there's not. I'm just saying it would make a lot of sense to literally search the nation for that department that realized that they get a lot more money for that asset. A friend of mine, an ex-boss, told me that the second truck he bought cost him twice as much as the previous truck. So until we get that recession and capital assets become cheaper, if you got trucks, it's a good way to get income. And I'm sure there are departments out there that are just strapped in their budget, and maybe they've got good instincts. But as far as the $700,000, that has not been paid back, is that correct?
All I know is we paid $750,000 towards the building.
For what?
For the building.
Well, I think it was like $2 million that was moved in December 2020. Some things that were approved and didn't happen, and some things that happened that weren't properly appropriated. And part of it was.
There were no appropriations for near that amount made.
Those
On
were,
paperwork from me.
those were appropriations that were done from funds that were not there. You can't transfer something that you don't have, which is why they were called illegal transfers by the Pro Report and the State Board of Accounts. There's nothing to repay. Money was moved, numbers were moved, but there was not those funds there to move
So
them.
weren't actually transferred.
Correct. You can't take money that's not there and move it to.
I think the SBOA even referred to something about that instead of being properly expended, that they were shifted from account to account.
Therefore, those are not on the list that have to be repaid, because again, monies were moved that were not there versus the other two negative funds.
Payroll clearing and then a whole bunch of community crossings. I hope you find an ambulance.
hey, Jim?
No.
Sheila, you got any comments?
AIC conference, info just went out, the hotel rooms are filling up quick, if anybody's interested.
When is that?
When is that?
Anton,
September 19th through the 21st, and I have a double, so if someone wants to double up with me, then that would be a good way to save some cost.
Where's it at?
South Bend.
Okay.
anyways, it's $185 per person,
Here's the date,
and the hotel fees as well.
September.
You got me down, didn't you, Sheila?
Yes.
Thank you.
You got me down?
Just get with me in the next couple weeks or so with that.
Okay, council comments? So. Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion with you.
Hey Greg, before you go too far, I'll get a bunch of stuff to you here soon.
Okay.
Can you get these two things here to Loretta?
Are you going, bro?
That would be great.
Oh, gosh, that's right.
Are you going